Chapter 30. Chapter 30. 1 hour of enchantment remains. Anouk tumbled off the rail car straight into the waiting hands of dozens of goblins. Hands pressed against her back, holding her up and passing her along through the crowd. Gaudy faces grinned at her. Rats squeaked. The music roared even louder. "Put me down," she cried, but they only bobbed her higher. She managed to lift her head enough to see Bo being hoisted onto a heavy-set goblin's shoulders. She tried to call out to him, but he was being carried in the opposite direction. She couldn't see Cricket or Hunter Black or Vigo, but judging from the curses and screams coming from the crowd, they were as tangled as she was. For the length of a few throbbing songs, Anouk let herself be carried around the eager crowd, gradually passed farther and farther from the Black Death, until the goblins lost interest in her and she managed to fight her way to the ground. She dropped down, hid in the midst of the dancing boots and stomping feet, and climbed over random bones until she was able to crawl out from the partying mass and into sweet freedom at the edge of the cavern. She collapsed against an empty copper kettle, gulping fresh air. "10 pennies," she called angrily, catching sight of him. He was standing next to an odd assortment of animal cages made from wired-together rib bones, sipping a cup of tea, tapping his foot to the music. She stormed over, shaking out the dust from her clothes. "Listen, I don't know what promise you think we made, but there won't be any dangerous quests if midnight comes and we turn back into animals." He consulted his pocket watch casually. "You wear too much, dearie." She felt the push of frustrated tears at the corners of her eyes, and she kicked at a skull. What on earth had made her think she could put her trust in goblins? Tenpenny bent to inspect the nearest cage, which was full of rats. "What a lovely coat on that one, though I've always been partial to white." She spun on him angrily. "Stop picking out a new pet and help us, but I require another rat. So you can bite off its head too?" "No, dearie, so you can." This shut her up. He returned to inspecting the rats and at last settled on a small black one that he fed a piece of cheese and then set on his shoulder. "I haven't forgotten my promise. I told you I would help, and if you'd stop screeching in my ear, that is what I will attempt to do. Now pick 2 more rats and follow me." She looked around for others. Bo was still being carried around on someone's shoulders, and there was no sign of the others in the crowd. She reached toward a rat, but paused. The thought of the small mouse pelt they'd taken from out of a Torah's closet. "Do we have to use rats? It's a little, personal." Tenpenny drummed his fingers on the rib bone bars. "Do you feel a kinship with roaches? No? Good. Come on. We can find some privacy in the skull crypt." He grabbed a jar of cockroaches and thrust it into her hands. She followed him down a small side tunnel and into an old crypt with a limestone sarcophagus on top of which was someone's half-finished dinner. Tenpenny swept the plates to the ground and started humming as he set down the jar of cockroaches in several messy-looking containers that reeked of rotten dead things. In the distance she could still hear the whir of the party. She took a step back and tripped over a dry, brittle skull. "We're really running out of time," she pointed out. "You can't rush magic. We're already working outside the rules as it is. You know about the Vitae Echo, yes? Magic is life, life is magic, and so forth and so on. The witches in their grand estates prefer to take life from flowers and butterflies and rosebuds. You'll find none of those pretty things in the dark holes they've relegated us to. Worms, slime, rats, those are our ingredients." Anouk made a face. "Don't recoil so, my dear. There is nobility in the rat, beauty in the moth. Though the rest of the world might not respect the dark creatures of the night, within these catacombs they are prized, each rat cherished until its death, and if we must sacrifice our crawly friends, we pour out a cup of tea in the deepest tunnel and say prayers for them." "And you can keep us human with slime?" "Absolutely, doubtlessly." He bit his lip. "Maybe." She dug the beastie spell out of her pocket and fanned the dust from the sarcophagus before laying the paper down reverently and smoothing out the wrinkles. "I hope you're right." "Excuse me. We risked a lot to get this spell." He cocked his head curiously, stroking the rat on his shoulder, then pushed the spell back her way. "Ah, perhaps you misunderstood. Such a complex spell is beyond goblin capabilities." Alarm bells went off in her head. "But you said you'd help us." "And I shall. I cannot cast the beastie spell, but one thing we goblins excel at is working around the rules." She sighed in frustration as he started pulling down jars and old tea tins from among the bones, humming to himself as he poured it all into a porcelain tea kettle. She turned away while he worked, watching the parties, trying to spot the others. Beneath their makeup, the goblins looked worn and tired. Some had mascara-streaked faces, almost all had thin, malnourished arms. It wasn't anything like the beautiful world of the Hote that the portraits showed, mischievous goblins peeking around corners. Goblins hadn't fallen to the bottom of the Hote by chance. It was a system designed to make them powerless. "Almost ready, dearie," Tenpenny called. "Fetch the others." She made her way back into the heart of the revelry, searching the made-up faces for her friends. She found Bo assessing stores of insects and bitter herbs next to the blonde-haired goblin girl with the gold teeth. Cricket was inside the Black Death with two goblins who were showing her the art of summoning tricks with hand gestures. Hunter Black was in a small crypt, sharpening a bone into a weapon, and Vigo, "There you are, my love, my soul, my heart." He pushed through the crowd and smacked into her hard enough to make her shoulders sting. His face was wan and lovesick. She led them all to the skull crypt where Tenpenny was mixing together the final ingredients with a curved rib bone. He gave the concoction a sniff and tossed the bone aside. "Now then, best beastie friends. This won't cure you, but it will do the next best thing." "What's that?" Bo asked suspiciously. "Kill you." "What?" At their horrified looks, he added, "Only temporarily." He poured off 4 teacupfuls of the potion. "This elixir has a powerful malignant effect that will by and by stop your hearts from beating. A stopped heart cannot age, can it? Time will halt for you, and if time stops, so does the countdown to the end of your enchantment." "Yes, but we'll be dead. Technically dead, but that doesn't mean you have to stop living. You'll still have use of your bodies, just like always." The elixir works slowly. It will take 24 hours to stop your hearts entirely. You can take an antidote before then. Cricket stared at the elixir. "So that's it? You're giving us poison, and it'll grant us only 1 extra day?" "I told you it wouldn't be pretty." Hunter Black scowled. "You tricked us, Goblin." Tenpenny acted offended. "It's 1 more day than you would have had without me." Anouk sat heavily on the sarcophagus, loose, brittle bones skittering at her feet. She coughed at the cloud of dust and tried to brush it off her clothes, but gave up. She was always dirty, always a mess. Was it so surprising she'd just led them into another mess? Cricket and Hunter Black continued to argue with Tenpenny while the blonde goblin who had followed at Bo's heels hung in the doorway staring at Bo moodily. "At least Renard promised us more than 24 hours, Cricket complained. "Renard? Bah, lies. Listen closely, dears. Renard and that witch told you only half the story. It's true that you aren't affected by the Vitae Echo, but saviors, ha! You weren't made to save anything, you aren't heroes." "Then what are we?" Bo asked. "Monsters. Oh, come, don't look surprised. Nothing good is ever created from magic. You are made to be the most terrifying things in the known world. The Vitae Echo is a safeguard. It is meant to keep handlers from slaughtering whole villages and from taking lives for their own gain. But you don't have that safeguard. You don't get it? Renard made you his weapons. You can do all the dastardly things that he can't, but only if he can control you. That's why the other beasties were destroyed." They were monsters, yes, which was what he wanted, but their mistake was not answering to him. "Do we look like bloodthirsty devils to you?" Cricket asked, motioning vaguely to the ribbon in Anouk's hair, to her own less than frightening maid's costume. Tenpenny turned to her. "You thirst for magic so you can exact revenge. You want to destroy, to tear down. I see it in your eyes." "And what's wrong with that?" "Nothing, my dear, as long as you don't mind living in a broken world." Cricket pressed her rosebud lips together tightly. Anouk glanced at the beastly spell. She felt shaken. In times like this, it was Luke they turned to. What would he do now? Would he trust the goblin poison? No, he would fix this himself. She jumped down from the sarcophagus and started digging through Tenpenny's tea canisters. Milk thistle in this one, sorrel in that one, a jug of some poor creature's blood in that. Still had fur floating in it. She grabbed a teapot and threw in ingredients. "Anouk?" Boo asked. "Just wait." Spells, even the most complex ones, didn't come with recipes. It was up to each magic handler to interpret the requirements of a given situation and develop a custom-made brew. Mata Vitor had been partial to roses and golden seal. Her tonics all held an air of romance, even when the spell had nothing to do with love. Cricket was fond of eucalyptus. What would Anouk's signature ingredients be? She would have liked to use feather down, but with only goblin stores to work with, she had to settle for white dandelion fluff. She sniffed her tonic and then took a sip. It burned deliciously on her tongue, like spices and licorice, she whispered. She didn't even need to look at the torn folio page. The words were buried deep inside her. They were her. Renard, Zola, and Tenpenny, the most prominent members of every order of the Hote, had all told her. She carried great power, and she could feel it, a tingle from her belly to her toes to her ears, a tickle on her lips. Scala animo. What are you? Bo said, but Cricket elbowed him. Quiet, it's the beastie spell, you idiot. Tenpenny can't cast it, so she's going to try. Anouk closed her eyes and let the syllables pour out of her. Gone was the throbbing beat of the party in the other room, the chatter of the rats from their cages. It was only her and the silent tongue as she was speaking it, feeling it working beneath her skin, and she was no longer the dark thing, but a girl, a real human girl. Then, without forewarning, fire. She cried out as sharp pain burned down her arms. It spread impossibly fast from her neck to her knees to her toes, replacing that delicious tingle with searing agony that made the spell, not even halfway spoken, die on her tongue, and her body crumple on the floor. Bo was immediately by her side, feeling her forehead, but this touch only burned more, and she cried out and pushed him away. A shadow fell over her. She squinted open an eye. That, my dear, was unbelievably stupid. Tenpenny stood over her, tisking. Only fools attempt magic so far beyond their ability. But you said we're powerful. She grimaced as another wave of pain radiated through her. No vitae echo. The pain you're feeling now? That isn't the vitae echo. That's just your body rejecting the change you were trying to put it through. Don't you understand there's a world of difference between talent and skill? When I said you had the ability to be more powerful than the royals, I meant innate potential. Potential means nothing without training. Do you even know the difference between a trick and a whisper? Don't answer that. Of course you don't. Poor dearie. How brave of you, and how absurd to try. He crouched over her, holding out the teacupful full of his own poisonous elixir. We've been at this a long time, my friend, since practically before pretties could clothe themselves. I don't care if you're saints or monsters. You can be whatever you want to be, as long as you help us retake London. I believe that was our deal, yes? Still shaking, Anouk reluctantly accepted the noxious brew. A dead dragonfly was floating in it. She sighed. What other option do they have now? He smiled. Splendid. Each of the others also took a teacup, and, wincing, they all drank down the poison. Anouk felt it spread down her throat, coating it like tar. She expected it to sink to her stomach in a heavy way, but it remained eerily in her chest. She rubbed at the skin over her heart. The beats came slower, and then stopped. Congratulations, Tenpenny said. You're officially deadish. Chapter 31. 15 minutes of enchantment remain. The first order of business, according to Tenpenny, was to get them clothes that weren't made of tattered curtains and gardening wire. The blonde goblin girl with gold teeth, December, led them into a tomb that served as a communal closet. Piles of dusty top hats in one corner, ties and cravats in another, and skeletons set up the room as dress dummies, arrayed in various British punk clothes. For Anouk, December rustled up boots and a pair of slim tuxedo trousers. They looked great with the Faustine jacket. For Cricket, she found a tweed suit with the pockets stylishly ripped out. Anouk ran her fingers along the smooth trousers worn at the hems. A hand-me-down, maybe, or stolen from a shop years ago and mended over and over. The goblins had so little, and yet were more than willing to share. Why had she ever believed that the Haute was a beautiful world of magic and grace? Everything had a darker side. Magic most of all. Midnight is in 5 minutes, Tenpenny said, admiring their improved fashion. Come, join the partiers. Tonight we celebrate not only our fortune, but yours. Let midnight come and dare it to change you. Anouk felt herself caught up in a wave of giggling goblins who herded her and Cricket to the dance area in front of the Black Death Bar. Someone had stolen a giant clock from one of the metro stations and suspended it from a ceiling on a heavy chain. Now it swung back and forth, sweeping over the crowd, a goblin straddling on top of it and waving at them all. The clock read 4 minutes to midnight. And then the goblins were dancing around her, and someone passed her a delicious warm drink, and she felt herself smiling. 3 minutes to midnight. She grinned widely now, jumping up and down with the goblins on either side of her. Someone started counting down, and she thought of a tradition among the pretties. A New Year's countdown, sealed with a kiss at the end. Her eyes searched the crowd for Bo. Shouldn't they celebrate? Midnight was coming, but it wouldn't take them. Not tonight. And one thing she'd learned was that they had to enjoy every second of life they had. In a place where magenta and blue and green hair was the norm, Bo's plain sandy hair stood out. He was about 20 feet away, and he was looking for her, too. She started weaving through the tight crowd. 5, someone counted in seconds. 4, then their eyes met. Bo grinned. It felt like the crowd had faded into the background. She felt herself moving toward him automatically, for once the goblins parting to let her pass. 3. The enormous clock overhead swung back and forth, casting a shadow on the revelers. Someone was dancing with one of the old skeletons, blocking her way, and she stood on tiptoe not to lose sight of Bo. 2! There, a path cleared. He was just steps away. 1! Midnight! The cavern erupted in cheers. She took a step toward Bo, feeling like someone in a fairy tale, like a pretty at a New Year's ball. But then someone else was tugging at her hand, pulling her sharply away from Bo. Viggo. It was Viggo. A second before she realized what was happening, he kissed her. His lips were softer than she'd imagined. He smelled like the sweet hot drink everyone was passing around, and his arm circled her waist as though screening them from the crowd, a private moment between the two of them. Viggo, you, stop it! She sputtered and shoved him away, but then softened when she saw the look on his face. Sheer, almost sweet happiness, even if it was because of a spell. She'd never seen Viggo look sweet, not once. He was a twat, and she'd sooner kiss a frog. But even frogs deserve little moments of joy. She pecked him softly on the lips. When she pulled back, Bo was standing next to them. His face was as slack as if she'd slapped him. He turned sharply, pushed his way through the crowd. The smile fell off her face as she disentangled herself from Viggo and ran after him. Wait, she said, catching his arm. Bo, I was only being nice. You know I can't stand Viggo, and he doesn't love me either. It's the spell. The spell, Bo muttered angrily. I'm sick of that spell. I'm ready for it to wear off, Anouk, ready for him to stop trying to kiss you and having you kiss him back. We need him like this. You like him like this, your puppet. Bo, that isn't true. Listen, we don't have time for stupid arguments about Viggo. But he strode away and was lost among the revelers before she could finish. She caught a glimpse of blonde hair and saw December sliding behind him through the crowd. Jealousy flared at her. Fine. Let the goblin girl try to comfort him when she couldn't. Twin goblin boys in blue bowler hats pulled her into a swirling dance, but she managed to extricate herself from their arms and slip in the refuge of a blessedly cool, empty tubes. She sank down on a fallen gravestone, hugging her knees. Why couldn't Bo focus on what really mattered? Tenpenny's concoction, vile though it was, had worked. Midnight had come, and they were all still human. Or were they all? Luke's disappearance nagged at her, like a briar just beneath the skin. Wherever he was, he hadn't drunk Tenpenny's elixir. Had midnight been the end for him? It was a terrible thought that he was truly lost to her now. What possible hope of finding him did she have when she wasn't even certain what kind of animal to look for? A mouse? An owl? Even if their paths crossed, he wouldn't know her and she wouldn't know him. Maybe she hadn't understood the first thing about being human if she'd failed her best friend so gravely. Oh no, did the poison work too well? Are you actually dead? Tenpenny sat down next to her and mocked, feeling her forehead. Still some breath in you. Why aren't you celebrating? Is that chauffeur giving you trouble? She paused and shook her head. Even if we can find someone to recast our spell, I'm afraid that a spell alone can't make us human, truly human. Only actions make a person human, not magic. Yes, Tenpenny mused. Well, and the fact that you don't have a tail, she rolled her eyes. My darling girl, look at you. Pale as a slug, drab as pudding. Tonight is not the night to feel depressed at the state of your reality. Here, you need some color. He produced a sleek tube of lipstick and drew on her left cheek, then her right. He sketched a shape, filled it in, licked his finger, and wiped off a smudge. Not perfect, but whatever is. He handed her a mirror. He'd drawn ruby red hearts on both of her cheeks, though messily. It gave her the look of a performer, and between that and the tuxedo trousers she blended in a little more with the goblins. There, now. Fashion is art, and we are the canvas. Do you feel like a piece of art, my dear? I feel more like that slug you were talking about. He tissed. Have you ever heard the story of the goblin and his shadow? No? Many years ago, a goblin angered a minor duke by baking his pet peacock into a pie, mistaking it for a chicken. The duke cursed him. Every day, the goblin started to notice his shadow hung around more, even in the light. It started to grow darker in places, especially around the eyes and nose. His eyes and his nose. When he looked into the mirror, he found that he was fading. His own shadow was trading places with him, stealing his life. He had to live the rest of his days in pure darkness, where there were no shadows before he swallowed him whole. What I'm saying is, don't let anything, not shadows, not sorrow, not peacocks, steal your brightest days. She sighed. It isn't that easy. There's one of us missing, the fifth beastie, Luke. He was like an older brother to me. He was there when I was first made, and he always protected me when I didn't know I needed protecting. And now the rest of us have been granted an extra day, but not Luke. We don't know where he is. When midnight came, he must have turned back. Tenpenny gazed at her with a puzzled expression. In a way, it's like he's dead, she continued. If he saw me, he wouldn't know me. Everything between us would be gone. Tenpenny still looked at her strangely, and she patted her hair self-consciously. What? Do I have something on my face? She brushed at the ever-present dust. Not that, dear girl. It's the other beastie, the gardener. What about him? An idea struck her, and she whipped her head around, searching the goblin crowd. Is he here? If she'd had a heartbeat, it would have raced. Of course he is. You brought him. What? That opalette you had with you, the one that Beau hid from the marble ladies. There are two sections, you know. The non-magical one that is currently holding your pelts. But there are all sorts of interesting things hidden away in the magical part. She stared at him as though he were speaking some foreign language. You unlocked the obelette? How? A little dirty magic did the job. I took a peek while you were in the loo to see if you'd brought anything good. And Luke? You mean to say that Luke is... that he's in the obelette? He gave her a quizzical look. Dear girl, don't tell me you didn't know that he's been with you the entire time. Oh my, what a delicious tragedy. Chapter 32. 24 hours of new enchantment remain. She jumped up as fast enough to send the bones skittering across the floor. A cloud of dust rose in their place. Where's the obelette now? Tenpenny scratched his chin. Last I saw, December was guarding it. She ran back to the thick of the party, searching the crowd for the goblin girl with the blonde braids. She spied Cricket dancing on top of the Black Death with the goblin boy in an indigo kilt and pushed toward them. Cricket, she shouted, where's Beau? He disappeared with December. That way, back toward the old metro tunnels. Is everything okay? Get the others and meet me in the skull crypt. Cricket gave her a curious look, but kissed her goblin boy sweetly on the cheek and climbed down from the top of the metro car, using the window frames as a ladder. The lights and music were pounding harder than ever. Anouk pushed through the dancing bodies to the tunnel that led back to the metro line. A few goblins loitered beneath the archway, smoking something spicy and sweet. There was no sign of Beau. She ran over the damp, dirty stone ground, calling his name. Low flickers of flame lit up loitering groups of goblins, some laughing or speaking in low voices, others in romantic embraces of 2 or 3 people. Have you seen December? She called to a group catching spiders in the dark with a butterfly net, and they pointed farther into the darkness. It was cold here, so far from the bonfire. She hugged her arms around her jacket, running her fingers anxiously over the embroidery. Then, in the dim light of an old curved metro lantern, she saw the back of Beau's sandy head. There you are. He wasn't alone. He turned and she saw blonde braids. December, her lips painted in electric pink, a matching glow to her cheeks. Beau's own lips were the same electric shade. Oh. Not the most eloquent response, but it was all she could think to say. Heat flushed up her neck. They'd been kissing here in the dark tunnel, Beau and December. What was this about that business with Vigo? Some kind of revenge? Beau's face went a shade paler. He made a quick effort to wipe the lipstick from his mouth. Nuke, listen. Oh, merde. I'm in... Yes, he most certainly was, and she was about to tell him as much, but then her eyes fell on the obelette resting at December's feet. That was more important than any kiss. She grabbed the bag and shook off the dust, unable to keep her anger from escaping. It's Luke, she spat. Beau's face flickered with uncertainty. Luke? He's trapped in the obelette. She hugged the bag to her chest and started running down the tunnel. past the kissing couples and spider chasers, hearing Bo and December's footfalls echoing behind her. Anouk, wait! The cold enveloped her like a shadow, but she barely felt it. Luke was here. He'd fix all of this. She'd soon see him again. Those warm brown eyes, that easy grin that said their problems were only hiccups and scrapes. This, he would say, the royals after us and time running out, this is nothing. She ran into the skull crypt, where Tenpenny and Cricket were waiting. She clutched the bag close. Bo and December ran up behind her. Anouk, Bo whispered insistently. She waved him away without glancing at him and turned to Cricket. Where are Viggo and Hunter Black? I couldn't find them. Cricket raised an eyebrow at the smeared pink lipstick on Bo's mouth. I see where you've been, Bo. Bo swore mildly under his breath and scrubbed at his face with his shirt tails, glancing anxiously at Anouk. Tenpenny snatched up the obolette. I'll take that. He laid it on the sarcophagus with a flourish and rolled up his sleeves for dramatic effect. Now, there is fine skill involved in breaking into a witch's obolette. Each one is locked with a particular spell that can be opened only by the witch who whispered it. Of course, we goblins are excellent at lock-picking. Anouk glanced at Bo out of the corner of her eye. His arms were crossed tightly over his chest, and she couldn't read the look on his face. Anxiousness, certainly, and almost a bit of dread, but she couldn't be sure how much of it was because she'd caught him with December or how much of it was due to the potion they'd drunk. They were mostly dead, after all. Watch this. Tenpenny shook out a few wriggling worms from a jar, slurped them down, and polished them off with a mug of beer. After a belch, he waggled his finger over the obolette. Changa changa a forma verum et abria. The burlap fabric started to glisten as it transformed from rough fibers to silk. Anouk caught glimpses of the other bags it had been. Ostrich leather, the Hermes, gold buckles, but it continued to morph until it settled on a worn leather sack with primitive stitching. The obolette in its true original form, Tenpenny said in a stage whisper, and then he flicked off a piece of worm he'd spat out. Ugly, isn't it? Fashion has improved dramatically in the past 400 years. Just open it, Cricket cried. Tenpenny upended the leather sack. All manner of things tumbled out onto the floor. Glass jars packed full with herbs. Old books with titles in a language Anouk had never seen. Oddly shaped wood carvings, and a parrot who squawked and flew away. December chased after it. Hey, that's mine, Cricket cried, grabbing a well-worn book. The book about the girl on the magic train. I thought Madame burned it. She hugged the book to her chest, grumbling curses about lying witches. Tenpenny shook the sack once more, and it grew and expanded, and then something enormous tumbled out of it. Something with arms and legs that somersaulted over the dusty floor and landed against the tomb with a painful-sounding crack. Luke! He looked awful. Grime coated his scalp and shoulders. The white gardener's uniform he usually wore was stained with dirt and long-dried blood. His brown-black skin was more sallow than she'd ever seen it. He didn't sit up. Anouk shoved past Tenpenny and knelt by Luke's side, touching his shoulder. Are you all right? His eyelids fluttered and he muttered something unintelligible, but he didn't wake. She shook him. This was wrong. He was supposed to grin at her and wink and say everything would be all right. He's been in there a long time, Tenpenny explained. Cramped space, you know. Not much to eat. I'm surprised he didn't gobble down that parrot. Shouldn't he have turned back into an animal? Cricket asked. Midnight came and he didn't drink the potion. But time doesn't exist the same way in the obolette as it does here. He's been in a state of suspended timelessness. Anouk glanced at Bo. He was chewing hard on his lips. Sweat had broken out on his temples. He didn't say anything. Was this still about the kiss? Bo, you don't look very surprised, Anouk said. Come to think of it, he'd been fiercely protective of the obolette ever since they'd fled the townhouse. She narrowed her eyes, but then Luke suddenly coughed back to life and she turned to him and touched his face. You're okay, she cried. Anouk? Luke's voice was rusty. He licked some moisture into his dry lips. Where? His eyes were dazed. You're out of the townhouse. How? He started coughing again. Anouk helped him stand. He was so thin, a boy made of sticks. He had spent almost 2 weeks trapped in whatever strange world lay within the obolette's walls. I'm so sorry we didn't get you out earlier. We didn't know where you were. Luke blinked a few times, pressing a hand to his forehead. Despite his weakened state, he had an air of solidity about him. Even on his deathbed, he still managed to find strength to jump up and box the ears of anyone who insulted her. His hands were smooth and firm and the color of night tulips, as he traced the finger over the cheeks painted with red hearts. "I'm supposed to look out for you, remember? Not the other way around." He tried to grin, but it came out as a grimace. She hugged him hard, feeling tears welling at the trace of time on his clothes. She had her North Star again. She let go, and then it was Cricket's turn to embrace him. Cricket whispered something in his ear that made him smile. He kissed her cheek. "Always, Gumdrop, always." Then he seemed to notice the tension between Bo and Anouk. His eyes dropped to the empty bag, then went back to Bo. "You didn't tell them?" Luke said. Anouk whipped her head to Bo. "Tell us what?" And then Bo's silence suddenly made sense to her. It was about far more than a kiss. She shoved herself to her feet. "Bo, did you know Luke was in there?" Bo flinched as though he'd been struck. "No!" She stared at him hard and he winced. "Well, not the whole time. I only learned that he was in the oubliette the night we fled, and then I didn't believe it was possible to get him out without another witch. Besides, once the royals were searching for Vittora's killer, I thought it would be best for him to stay in there, hidden, until it was safe to come out." Anouk gaped at him. "What does Vittora's killer have to do with anything?" Both Luke and Bo went very quiet. At last, Luke rested a hand on Anouk's shoulder. "You loved her so deeply, Anouk. I'm sorry." Anouk still stared at Luke and Bo, uncertain, and then it all came crashing down on her. She leaned against the tomb, suddenly not trusting her own legs to keep her standing. "You killed her," she whispered to Luke. Luke sank wearily onto the tomb, dusting the grime from his short hair. He took a deep breath. "It started with the rabbits." He explained in a rusty voice how he had overheard Madame Vittora's plan to kill and replace all of them but Anouk, and that he knew he had to stop her. He prevented it the best he could, having Anouk cook the rabbits before the witch could perform the spell. He even tried to contact Matazola for help, not knowing that Matazola would turn on him. After he returned from the Chateau de Mille Fleurs, Madame Vittoria was waiting for him. She cursed him into the oubliette. It was dark in there, like the world was cast in shadows. I searched for a way out, but there was nothing. No doors, no windows. I had no idea how much time was passing, for all I knew. She was going to leave me there for centuries, but the rest of you were in danger. I had to come up with a way out. And then I found this." He took a vial out of his pocket. Cricket squinted. "Parsley?" "Jimsonbane," he said. "It's rare. Most of the world has forgotten about it. I came across a reference to it years ago in an ancient botany encyclopedia. I'm not even certain Madame Vittoria remembered she had a vial left in the oubliette." The distant dance party still raged, but in the quiet of the crypt, Anouk felt like she was caught in that same never-ending timelessness that Luke must have felt in the oubliette. "Jimsonbane," he continued, "is the only herb known to have ethereal projection properties. If handled correctly, it can cast an herbalist's spirit outside of the body and out of the oubliette to escape," Cricket guessed. "Well, that was the idea." Luke frowned as though remembering something unpleasant. "It didn't quite work like that. I did cast my spirit out, intending to escape, but I cast it right into Madame Vittoria's bedroom. She was there. It looked late outside, maybe close to midnight. She'd been drinking. When she saw my spirit, she went pale. I saw myself in the mirror. I looked translucent like a ghost." "A ghoul, you mean," Tenpenny clarified. "Ghosts don't exist." Luke gave him a suspicious look. Who are you again?" "Long story." Tenpenny petted his new rat. "Right." Luke eyed the rat blood on the goblin's cravat. "Anyway, I could feel the Jimsonbane fading. I could see my spirit flickering, and Vittoria saw it too. She thought she'd won. But she didn't know that spirits on Jimsonbane have the ability to hold physical objects, one of the reasons why it's so valuable. I took the knife from her dresser and stabbed her. I had to. She was going to kill us." Anouk looked down at her hands, remembering her mistress's blood on them. She wanted to feel the hot buzz of anger again. She wanted to feel something, but could she condemn Luke for killing their mistress after everything she'd done to them and was going to do to them? Still, she felt a small part of herself slip away. She'd loved Madame Vittoria once, a twisted, misunderstood love, but even the cruelest forms of love were never lost without heartache. I didn't have much time after that, Luke said. The Jimson vein was used up. My spirit returned to my body in the oubliette. Bo came upstairs just as it was happening. Anouk turned hotly on Bo. There was no reason not to tell us. Bo rubbed his scalp awkwardly, wincing at our tone. Telling you wouldn't have freed him. Besides, what was I supposed to say? That your best friend had murdered the witch you considered a mother? I was afraid it would break your heart. I was trying to protect you. Anouk stared at him, uncertain what to think. What did it mean that he thought lies could protect someone? Was that how he saw her? As an artless, sheltered girl incapable of facing reality? She stepped back, looked at the scattered magical objects at her feet, anything to avoid looking at Bo. Jars of herbs, scraps of paper with long-forgotten spells, gold coins, priceless objects that now belonged to them. Luke touched her shoulder. Can you forgive me, Anouk? She drew in a breath. I understand why you did what you did. She paused and then blurted out, At least you're here now. You can fix this entire mess. She waited for Luke's confident grin, that knowing wink. He held out his hands, shaking his head. I can barely stand, Dust Bunny. I've been gone. I can't fix anything. But you always know what to do, Anouk insisted. Then she saw that Cricket and Bo and Tenpenny were now looking at her the same way she had once looked at Luke. When had she become the one everyone turned to for guidance? A flicker of hope started to return. She swallowed. There's nothing wrong with the little dust, she said, blowing a streak of it off of Luke's thumb. Outside the crypt, the dance party had dwindled to a core group of revelers. The rest of the goblin horde were asleep on the catacomb floor, using skulls for pillows. It felt cold. Too cold. Where was Vigo? Ever since she'd cast the love spell, he had been practically glued to her side. The smile fell off her lips. Where are Vigo and Hunter Black? She asked sharply. About that. Bo looked even more uncomfortable. I was so sick of that love spell that I had December break it. I didn't think we needed Vigo's help anymore. Love spell? Luke asked, bewildered, and then he raised his eyebrows doubtfully. Vigo? I have so much gossip to tell you, Cricket said. If the spell is broken, then Vigo isn't loyal to us anymore, Anouk said. He'll go straight to the royals and then tell them that we're here in the catacombs. I'll find the prick, Cricket offered, producing a blade. We don't have the time. They could be anywhere in Paris by now. We have to change our plan. To what? We were short on options to start with. A paper fluttered to the floor and landed amid the detritus. The BC spell. Anouk knelt down, smoothed it out, and then flipped it over and sniffed. Once more she smelled that familiar odor of onion and lemon, only now, with Luke back, she remembered where she knew it from. The secret messages she and Luke used to write to each other in invisible ink and slide beneath each other's doors. She met his eyes and smiled. She dug a match out of her pocket, whispered a flame to life, and held it a careful distance below the spell. Luke might not be able to solve their problems for them anymore, but he had given her an idea. There's always another way, she said, if you're desperate enough. Chapter 33. 22 hours of new enchantment remain. She blew out the candle flame. Look at this! She showed them the back of the beastie spell. Renard didn't only write a spell to turn animals into humans. There's a second spell here, written in an invisible solution of sepa de apa, lemon, and diluted blood. I knew I recognized that spell. She shared a knowing look with Luke. The words were revealed and exposed to fire. It's a contra beastie spell that can turn humans to animals. Tenpenny peered over her shoulder at the spell. It's surprisingly elegant. Renard does have a way with words, doesn't he, that handsome devil? So you can cast it? Goodness, no. Anouk's lips parted, ready to insist that he at least try. But you can, he added. She wrinkled her nose in surprise. The spell is above all exceptional in its simplicity. You see, it's much easier to turn a human into a toad than the other way around. Even someone with only a basic mastery of magic such as yourself could manage the pronunciation, but the ingredients, there's the catch. He pointed to a notation on the spell. The beastie spell requires no more than a thimbleful of blood, but the contra beastie spell calls for 6 pints. That's far more than any goblin or even royal could consume. The Vitae Echo would ravage us, but you, dearie, could guzzle that much and more. This took all of them by surprise. Finally, Cricket broke the silence and said, I hope you're proposing to turn Vigo into a toad. Not Vigo, Matazola. Anouk swept aside the bones from the sarcophagus and traced a map in the grime on the top. The royals haven't yet lifted Matazola's banishment. She's still trapped in her estate. If the goblins will help us lay siege to Chateau de Mille Fleurs and capture Matazola, we can force her to perform the BC spell on us before midnight tomorrow under threat of casting the contra spell on her. You want to return to Montelimar? Beau sounded uncertain. It's our strongest chance, and besides, Vigo doesn't know about it, so he won't be able to warn her of our plan. Tenpenny, can we still count on the goblins to fight for us? A deal is a deal, dearie. Cricket leaned in the doorway, looking out over the sleeping masses with a frown. They don't look like much of an army, Tenpenny scoffed, affronted. I'll have you know that goblins have incredible stamina. And then he too evaluated the drunken sprawl of sleeping revelers, and his confidence waned. Cappuccino is a wonder for shaking off fatigue. They'll be fine. Once again we're screwed. Cricket muttered. You keep saying that, Beau countered, but we've gotten out of every narrow scrape, breaking into Castle Ides, stealing the spell, avoiding the crows, fighting off the royals, and we're still alive. True, except for the fact that currently we're actually dead. She kicked at the empty vial of Tenpenny's heart-stopping elixir. Luke rubbed the sides of his head like he was still caught in some freakish other reality. Wait, the 4 of us and some goblins are going to attack Chateau de Mille Fleurs? He let out a long puff of air. Merde! Is it too late to banish me to the oubliette again? Anouk smacked him on the arm. Matazola's witch's girl, Petra, went behind her mistress's back to help us. She might help us again. That could make all the difference. Luke turned to Tenpenny. If we're doing this crazy thing, let's at least be smart about it. Where's your scribe board? We can listen in on anything Zola and Renard might be scheming. Tenpenny cleared his throat. Scribe board? Never heard of it. Sounds like something illegal. When Anouk gave the goblin a hard look, he conceded with an eye roll. He went to the hallway and called for December, who returned with the parrot on her shoulder. December, show them the scribe board. December led them through another graffiti-lined tunnel to a low wooden door. Anouk ducked inside. No bones here, but the smell of something rotting was thick, and she held a hand against her nose. She didn't recognize the scribe board until she heard its whispers, or rather its hissing. There were no glistening black feathers here, no ropey vein-like wires. Instead of being made from organic materials taken from crows, this scribe board was made from insect components. A hard carapace covered the whole contraption. She eyed it uncertainly, only to realize it was eyeing her back with a fractured 8-sided insect eye emerging from one side. Luke sat on the stool, cupping a scaly set of headphones over his ears. She took a step backward and bumped into Beau. He motioned her into the corner, where they had some privacy. He looked nearly sick with guilt. You're angry about December. Her mind went back to the dark metro tunnel and pink lipstick on 2 sets of lips. I hope you don't need magic to tell you that. I was jealous about Vigo and Renard, and she said I had nice hands, and you know I'm vain about my hands, and it was stupid, so stupid. A sigh escaped to Newt's lips. It doesn't matter right now. We don't have time to argue over smeared lipstick when our lives are running out. She started to turn away, but he stopped her. I should have told you about Luke. Yes, that was the real problem, wasn't it? She looked away before he could see the still fresh sting in her eyes. I'd do anything to keep you from being hurt, he insisted. You loved Luke and Madavatora more than you loved anyone else. How could I tell you that one had killed the other? I'm not a bird with broken wings, Beau. I don't need to be sheltered. I was wrong. You were naive then, and you certainly aren't now. Through all this darkness, you've held on to love and hope, and that's true strength. She wasn't sure how to respond to this. The boy who'd spent every day of her human life with her was now seeing her, the real her, for the first time. I should have seen that there was no love in Madhavatora's heart, she admitted. Luke did the right thing. It's better that she's dead. Bo didn't answer, but his face showed that he didn't think she believed that. Love was love, even if it had been cruel, and it was like Bo to see that she was still mourning Madhavatora, even if she refused to admit it to herself. I won't keep anything from you again, Cabbage. She pressed a finger to his lips to silence him. She was reminded of the first time they had kissed in Mount Lamar. She held her finger to his lips like this, and then replaced it with her own lips. What would Renard, with his proposal of marriage, think of his beasties in each other's arms? You mesmerized him, Bo murmured, reading her mind. The prince. I could see it in his eyes. She dropped her finger from his lips. He wanted to use us. It's more than that. He's fascinated by you. You have something he lost long ago. Youth. Wonder. He was enchanted by your hopefulness. He has everything under the sun, power and time and riches most people only dream of. But he doesn't have what you have, not anymore. He traced a thumb gently along the red heart on her left cheek. And he has what you want, too. Knowledge, answers, the confidence that comes from experience. I could feel the pull between the two of you. You're fascinated by him, too. His words felt dangerously close to painting a picture of her and Renard, and it wasn't a picture she felt comfortable with at all. What are you saying? Just that I'm glad you didn't step into that cage. Slowly his arm circled her back, holding her not like a broken bird, but like a slice of cake he wanted to devour whole and then lick up every last drop of icing, but Luke interrupted them. Anouk, get in here and listen to this. See if you can make it out. He took off the carapace headphones and cranked up the external speaker. Anouk and Bo joined him and Cricket at the scribeboard. The hisses were very quiet, but she was used to quiet. It was a sound she had heard before. Dragonflies. They're saying that Castle Ides is empty, she said in surprise. Empty? Bo said. Where'd all the royals go? Oh, Ned, it's here, isn't it? Vigo told him we're in the catacombs and every royal in Paris is on the way down here. No, Anouk cut him off. They aren't coming here. She clicked off the speaker tensely. The dragonflies say they're going to Montelimar. Cricket swore. How did they know that was our plan? Great, now we're supposed to capture Matazola and fight off the royals? There's no way. And before you say anything, Bo, I mean it this time, royally. You're underestimating the effects of cappuccino on goblins, my dear. Tenpenny said, coming in from the Grand Hall, not to mention the fact that we have the numbers. Even if the royals bring the lesser court, how many of them are there? 9 or 10, plus one witch? And there are hundreds of us. He took a calm sip of tea. Bo massaged the bridge of his nose as though his head ached. I still don't understand why Renard and the royals would bother to go to Montelimar if Vigo had told him we're here. We're literally right under their noses. Seriously, those pipes are marked Boulevard Saint-Michel, which is a block from Castle Ides. They all tipped their heads toward the dripping municipal water pipes that fed into the upper city. Anouk felt like something cold in her back, a breeze that wasn't there. Why hadn't Renard simply raided the catacombs? Now, with most of the goblins still yawning and stretching and hunting up clothes, they wouldn't have put up much of a resistance. Because I didn't tell him where you were, a voice said. Vigo stood in the doorway. His hair was entirely black now, a reminder that midnight had come and all of Vittora's spells were broken. For a second, Anouk thought of the goblin girl cursed to fall in love with a yellow mail van. At least now she was free. Everyone who had been bound by Vittora's spells was. Vigo, her breath quickened. She'd cast a spell on him without his permission. She'd made a slave of him, forced him to do all sorts of humiliating things. The Vigo she knew would have been plotting an elaborate revenge that involved many sharpened spikes. Hunter Black was behind him, the ever-present shadow. She eyed them both closely. What are you doing back here? If you mean am I going to try to kiss your feet again? No, the spell is done. I'm not happy about that love spell, by the way. I think we all know that I never would have done those things if not under the influence of magic beyond my control, just so we're all clear. No one answered. Anouk wasn't entirely positive he wasn't plotting revenge. I didn't go to Renard, he said, guessing at their silence. I didn't tell the royals anything. Oh, I considered it. As soon as December broke the curse. Hunter Black and I stormed out of here, and I had every intention of returning with an army of crows at my heels, but I didn't. Then why did you come back? Cricket snapped. His dark eyes flashed to hers. Because you need me. Ha! No, you do. If you're going to go through with this insane plan to storm Montelamar and fight off both Zola and Renar, you'll need powerful magic on your side, blood magic. He looked theatrically over his left shoulder and then his right. I don't see any other humans around here willing to siphon off pints of blood for you. He was right, Anouk realized. They had goblin numbers, but the royals were experts in manipulating magic. The few simple whispers she could do would be nothing against them. The Contrabeastie spell required powerful ingredients, the most rare of which was 6 pints of blood, which meant there was only one way they might prevail, by exploiting the fact that Renard's and Zola's magic had limits. The Vitae Echo, she didn't have that limit. But we'd need half of your blood, she said. That could kill you. He tossed back a lock of dark hair. Possibly. She narrowed her eyes at his cavalier attitude. Why would you risk that for us after everything we did to you? The spell. Yes, the spell, he said, his dark eyes cold. That spell wasn't about love at all, but manipulation. True love has to be as equals. Two people who come together willingly. Love isn't about possession. He paused dramatically. It's about sacrifice. He was staring at Cricket, and she didn't look impressed. She sighed coldly. Is this what you tell me, that through the curse of the spell you've actually learned the true meaning of love? Well, Merd, I'd been planning that speech all the way down here. She rolled her eyes. He hasn't changed at all. I have, he said, and for once he sounded sincere. I understand now that what I felt for you wasn't love. It was obsession. It wasn't until Anouk made me her love captive that I realized that's never what I'd want for you. Do I really love you? Oh, Lors, I don't know. I'm not certain I'm even capable of love. Mommy issues and all. He cleared his throat. Anyway, this is what I'm offering. My blood, maybe even my life, and you'd better say yes before all that wine I drank 20 minutes ago wears off and I stop feeling so heroic. Cricket still didn't smile, though she hadn't reached for the blades, which was at least one promising sign. I'm sorry, Cricket, I was in... She narrowed her eyes. Apology accepted, but if you think there is even a slight chance that I'll love you back after all this is over, you're wrong. Well, chances are high that I'll be dead anyway. So what does this mean? Tenpenny said. Anouk turned to him. It means you have about an hour to wake the rest of the goblins and be ready. We have an errand to run. Pick us up outside 18 Rue des Amants in 1 hour. Tenpenny consulted his watch. In 1 hour, dearie. Tick-tock. Chapter 34. 20 hours of new enchantment remain. It was still raining in the streets of Paris. A light mist cast an orb around each of the streetlights, and as they hurried along the thoroughfares, Anouk felt how fiercely she loved this city. All those nights sitting in her turret window and watching the pretty world outside. She had wondered if she'd ever be part of it, if her feet would ever stroll these streets, if she'd ever look up at the glowing moon. She had wondered if it could possibly be as perfect as she imagined, or if a rock would always be in her shoe on that stroll, if smog would always obscure the moon. And it was true, there were rocks and there was smog, but there was also stars. The city was like life itself, good and bad, pretty and ugly, kindness and cruelty all in one, but most important, it simply was. And that felt like a kind of magic, too. Rue des Amants was quiet in the early morning hours, a wealthy neighborhood filled with townhouses, used only part of the year by residents who also lived in Switzerland and New York and Monaco. It lacked the vibrancy of the Latin Quarter, where the students quoted Descartes all night, cafes and music hummed in the street. Their footsteps echoed off the quiet townhouses as they passed rows of black cars. Anouk stopped at the sad little tree in front of number 18. No one bothered to water it? Luke asked accusingly. I couldn't cross the threshold, Anouk reminded him. It felt strange to re-enter the townhouse. She had never come in through the front door, and as she stepped inside with the obolette in hand, she pictured herself here just 3 days ago, eager to serve and stow away the obolette. She marveled at how simple life had been then, how little she'd known, and yet how wildly she dreamed. She bent down and picked up her old hair ribbon. Her body? Luke asked. Taken care of, Vigo answered without elaborating. He pushed past them up the steps, heading to the bloodletting room. Hunter Black followed at his heels, but Anouk took her time looking at the townhouse with new eyes. It had been her home as much as it was Madame She had cared for it, cooked in the kitchen, swept the floors. Convinced Beau or Luke to make any repairs that were needed, Beau went to the kitchen to scarf down whatever leftovers he could find in the icebox, and Cricket went with him in search of a whetstone to sharpen her blades. I should change clothes, Luke said, and he climbed the stairs to his attic. Anouk followed slowly up the turret to her own bedroom, where she ran her hand over the baby shoes, the playbills, the little things from the pretty world she had so loved. A sheen of dust covered her desk, and she grabbed a cloth to clean it, as she had done countless times, then stopped. All those little tasks, sweeping and polishing and cooking, belonged to another person's life now. No matter how hard she scrubbed, she'd never be that person again. She went back downstairs, pausing at Madame room. The room was open a crack. A sense of foreboding overcame her as she remembered the last time she'd stood here and mistaken the blood for red wine. She inched the open door. No body, as Vigo had said. Even the bloodstain was gone. She knelt down, ran her fingers over the rug. None of her cleaning products could have gotten it out so well. Someone had done this with magic. And then she whipped her head around to the portrait above the bed. Prince Renard. She could feel his lingering presence, smelled a trace of his cologne. He'd been here. Vigo must have invited him for the day. Renard would have taken care of her mistress's body. She wondered if he'd gone into her room too, if he'd touched her things she had once his. Could Renard see her from the portrait now? She climbed up on the bed and turned it around to face the wall. The townhouse was protected by ancient magic that not even he could break. He couldn't set foot beyond the front step without an invitation, and she didn't want his eyes in the house either. Outside of the bloodletting room, she heard the hiss of the chair's machinery. She pushed open the door, hesitantly. Hunter Black was seated on a wooden bench by Vigo's side. Vigo had his eyes closed. His lips were very pale. The jar was fuller than she'd ever seen it before. It held 4 pints, at least. Hunter Black didn't look up when she came in. His gaze stayed focused on Vigo's pale lips. Anouk sat next to him. He's asleep? He passed out after 3 pints. He might make it, she said. It's possible to survive with only 6 pints left. His chances of surviving are probably better than ours will be at Montelimar. Hunter Black didn't answer. Anouk hesitated, unsure how to ask the question on her lips. You love him, don't you? Of course. She considered her words carefully, thinking of Luke's fairy tales, the prince and his footman. I mean, you're in love with him. His back jerked upright as though he'd been attacked. His dark eyes flashed. He looked ready to deny it, but then he let out a long growl of a sigh. His silence said everything. The love spell, she said. It wasn't real. You know that, right? Of course it wasn't, he snapped. He would never love you. She didn't take offense at his words. She knew a wounded animal when she saw one, and she also knew hopelessness. A boy in love with a boy who liked girls. A cruel twist of fate. He can't love you back, she said quietly, not romantically. Thank you for reminding me of such painfully obvious fact. But he cares about you. You're his best friend, his only friend. Hunter Black grunted for an answer. They sat on the bed watching the machinery continue to pump Vigo's blood. 5 pints now. Anouk tried not to think about having to drink it, instead focusing on how strong it would make her. Both Matazola and Prince Renard had told her that she was capable of amazing things. She was going to get her chance to prove it, but as she watched Vigo grow more and more pale, it sat uneasily with her. Beasties weren't susceptible to the Vitae echo, but she couldn't shake the feeling that magic could still have a cost. No life was taken without consequences. If Vigo died, that magic wouldn't have come for free. That blue flame spell, she said quietly to Hunter Black. Do you still want to learn it? He looked away from Vigo at last and gave a single nod. Anouk found a pouch of borage herb in the attic, and they consumed leaves of it, and she taught him the words of the Silentium box spell and the accompanying hand gestures. Hunter Black tried again and again to master the right tone. As an assassin, he was used to being quiet. He wasn't used to being calm. At last the pump clicked off, and Hunter Black stuffed the borage in his pocket and checked Vigo's vital signs. Anouk unbuckled him from the machine. 6 pints. When she lifted his arm, it felt alarmingly light, like a limb without bones. His pulse? Still there, Hunter Black said. Weak, but steady. Vigo suddenly gave a slight moan. Need wine. How about water? Anouk suggested gently. She went to the bathroom to pour him a glass while Hunter Black carried him from the bloodletting chair to the bed, pulled off his shoes, and laid the blanket over his body. Vigo was shivering slightly. She paused in the bathroom door as Hunter Black smoothed Vigo's hair off his forehead. It felt like something she shouldn't be watching. She cleared her throat and set the water on the side table. Vigo, how do you feel? Like I'm missing half my blood. You are. Well, that explains it. A car horn blared outside, the British anthem, unmistakably the Goblins'. Anouk checked the clock. 6 in the morning. The sun would be rising soon. One last day. What are you waiting for? Vigo's voice was raspy, his eyes closed. With a weak hand, he slapped away Hunter Black. Get out of here already and turn that flower witch into a potpourri. Hold on until tomorrow. We'll be back, Anouk promised. Hopefully without tails, Vigo murmured. Anouk squeezed his hand. She took the pints of blood, hid them away in her obolette, and slung it over her shoulder. Thank you, Vigo. The car honked again. Bo appeared at the doorway. Anouk, Hunter Black, time to go. Give them a minute, Anouk said. And she herded Bo down the stairs. In another second, Hunter Black joined them in the foyer. Dressed in his black coat, his hair slicked back and knotted at the nape. If he felt any sadness or worry for Vigo, by now he knew how to hide it. You think you've mastered the blue flame spell? She asked. I learn fast when it comes to new ways to kill people. They stepped into the front garden. A fleet of goblin motorcycles filled Rue de Amance. There had to be 100 motorcycles, most of them carrying 2 or 3 goblins. There was much honking and cheering, and Anouk thought that maybe Cappuccino was magic. Bo, Cricket, Hunter Black, Luke, and her, the 5 of them together at last. They stood on the front steps as a team, a family. Someone from across the street yelled about the early hour and threatened to call the police, but Anouk just grinned. If there was anything to fear in the streets of Paris, it was her. Chapter 35. 17 hours of new enchantment remain. They rode without stopping, speeding past villages and fields, tearing down curving roads, honking at any car that decided to drive too slowly, clutching Tenpenny around the middle. Anouk felt distinctively queasy. She had drunk every pint of Vigo's blood. Slowly, giving it time to digest, and now it sat heavy in her stomach, and Tenpenny's driving didn't help. But as the hours passed, she began to feel a change. The blood felt less like a greasy puddle in the pit of her stomach, and more like sunlight spreading through her body. Warm and bright and life-giving, she felt marvelously daring, like she'd drunk too much champagne or was walking on the edge of a rooftop. 6 pints of blood, enough to cripple a witch. Madavitor had been careful never to add more than a thimbleful of blood to her potions. Any more, and the Vitae Echo would start to take effect. Her skin would turn brittle, her back would stoop. Dust would be shed from her clothing and collect in her wake, as though she were desiccated from the inside out. But Anouk felt the opposite, young, vital, alive. She slid on a pair of black sunglasses, and from the next motorcycle over, Cricket gave an approving nod. Anouk grinned. Being on the back of a motorcycle was a bit like flying. She could feel the pulsing energy of the goblins, their determination and hope. This battle meant everything for them, too. The first step toward regaining the city they loved, and ever since dancing atop the Black Death with goblins, she wanted that for them. Throw out the London witches, install a new leader, preferably one in a top hat. The sky darkened. She looked up, expecting a cloud, and her mood dimmed at the flock of crows that had moved in overhead. Crows, she called in Tenpenny's ear. He nodded grimly. There will be no element of surprise for us. What of the Contrabisi spell? Are you ready? Vigo's blood kept pulsing, like lightning bugs in her body, making her feel light and strong, and she nodded. And the witch's girl of the dubious loyalties? It was impossible to guess what Petra might do when they arrived. At first blush, Petra had seemed content living with Zola and tending gardens. But Anouk knew from experience that just because a witch's servant looked happy didn't mean she was. Let's hope that soft spot in her heart extends to goblins. She smelled the lavender long before they saw the fields, pine-like and rich, a smell that was intoxicating even now that she'd learned about the dark secrets that might be buried beneath the soil. They crested a hill, and the first lavender rose appeared in long arcs that stretched toward the midday sun. It was a clear day, but there was a chill in the air. She was glad for her jacket. She patted the pockets where she had stashed a knife and the contrabeasty spell. Beau pulled ahead of the pack and signaled to the others to follow him down the road to the estate. The Chateau de Millefleur's topiary hedge rose along both sides of the road. The leaves looked sharper, more like slick green blades. Had the hedge always been so high? It was tall enough now to block out the sun and plunge them into a shadow. Beau slowed to a steady crawl as he led the procession of motorcycles down the gravel lane, but he didn't bother to cut his engine, dismount, and walk his bike. There was no reason for stealth. The Crow spies had made certain they would surprise no one. He stopped 10 feet from the gate, signaling for the goblins to go no farther. "The hedge is dangerous," he called. "Don't let anyone get too close." "So how do we get through?" December asked. Beau dismounted and waved over Anouk and the others. In Luke's fairy tales, armies always brought a vast array of weapons: pistols, armored horses, missiles, but the most threatening-looking things in Goblin Army were a few sharp hatpins. They were as bound by the Vitae Echo as the royals. This battle would be fought with magic, not firearms. Anouk and Luke and Cricket and Beau gathered beside the call box. Hunter Black, in typical Hunter Black fashion, had separated himself from the crowd and was inspecting the hedge as closely as he dared. For the corner of her eye, Anouk saw a goblin take cautious steps to the nearest branch and poke it hesitantly with an umbrella. She was about to call for him to back away when Luke said, "We could dig under." Beau shook his head. "That's how Vigo got in last time. I saw Matazola cast a spell to prevent it ever happening again." "If we set up a ramp," Cricket offered, "the goblins could jump it with their motorcycles." "The spell blocks us from going over too," Beau said. A sudden scream interrupted them. The goblin who'd wandered too close to the hedge was flat on the ground with vines wrapped around his ankles. He tried to sit up, but 2 more vines reached from the hedge and clamped onto his arms. All too fast, the vines dragged him inward. "Kingsley!" Tenpenny cried. In a few strides, Hunter Black was by the goblin's side with his knife drawn. He slashed the vines, but there were too many of them. For every one he cut, 3 more appeared. The goblin cried out, his voice rising in pitch, silenced only when the vines swallowed him into the hedge. Only a blue bowler hat was left behind. A stunned silence overtook the crowd. Tenpenny ran up, breathless, with eyes even wider than usual. He picked up the fallen hat with shaking hands. A vine curled around Hunter Black's wrist, but he sliced it off and stepped out of the reach. Tenpenny and the rest of the goblins took a few steps backward, too. Worry rippled through the crowd. Anouk turned to the trash bins and kicked one over with a frustrated cry. Champagne bottles tumbled out amid a messy tangle of sticks. She stopped moving. At first, the sticks looked like any hedge trimmings, but a certain twist of one branch caught her eye. The branch curved almost like a jaw, with a row of thorns rising up like teeth. "Toblerone," she whispered. "Now is no time to think about chocolate," Tenpenny said sharply. "No, it's Toblerone." She held up the jaw branch. "These sticks used to make up an enchanted topiary bear. The branches were his bones. He died innocent. He was cut up and pulled apart. Petra must have dumped him out here with the trash." Luke, still weak from his time in the oubliette, looked aghast. Who would do that to an innocent shrubbery bear? Both Anouk and Cricket looked pointedly at Hunter Black, who scowled. "That was a long time ago." "It was the day before yesterday," Cricket yelled. "Well, a day and a half ago I was trying to tear you apart too, Cricket. And look at us now, one big happy family whose members haven't attempted to murder one another in at least a few hours." Anouk gathered the branches of the bear and laid them out like puzzle pieces of the gravelling. "If we can resurrect him, there's a chance he could get through the hedge. He's made of hedge, and he's outside the estate borders, which means Zola can't control him." She put down the final branch and stepped back. She could feel the magic flowing within her, and it felt right. Cheating, not destroying, but as much as she wanted to resurrect the bear herself, she didn't dare use up any of Vigo's blood. It was a finite supply, enough for only a single big spell, one burst of magic. If she used it now, she wouldn't have enough left to cast the contrabeasty spell on Matazola. "Tenpenny, can you resurrect him?" The goblin tenderly handed his fallen friend's bowler hat to December, who tucked it into a motorcycle bag. He fished a worm out of his pocket, swallowed it, and then held his hands over the wooden bones and whispered, "Vitae, Vitae ahora." It happened slowly. First there was a flutter of leaves, then a twig fluttered too, moving a little too much to have been caused by a breeze alone, and then an even bigger branch whirled out onto another. The branches began to graft themselves back together at the places where they'd been cut, forming a wooden skeleton with limbs and a backbone and a heavy skull with thorny teeth, and then it all came together with one beautiful shiver, and Anouk was looking not at a pile of hedge clippings, but at a live topiary bear. Toblerone pushed himself up on his trunk-like legs, shook out his leafy green pelt, and then swiveled his head to Tenpenny. "Command him to tear through the hedge," Anouk said. After swallowing more worms, Tenpenny whispered another spell. Slowly the bear's head swung to face the hedge. He lumbered forward on heavy limbs, swiped at the nearest branches with a massive paw, and shredded them with his sharp torn claws like they were made of crepe paper. No vines started out to snag, and no branches fought back beneath his woody paws. The hedge gave way as he tossed branches aside, snapped sticks, and cleared a path wide enough for him to pass through. "Bravo!" Anouk said. Tenpenny turned his goblin army. "Prepare for entry." The goblins dismounted from their motorcycles and checked their belongings one more time, making sure each was safely secured by its brass pocket watch chain. A few knives glinted in the sunlight, and even an antique sword or two. The air filled with the smell of bitter herbs, rue and horehound and wormwood, and the tang of blood as the goblins consumed the life essence they needed for the battle. Anouk winced at the squeals of rats that were dispatched for the cause. A murmuring spread through the crowd as the goblins thanked their deceased animal companions for the sacrifice they had made. "Do not forget the dark truth about this place," Tenpenny announced to the crowd. "Beneath the witches' fields are the flesh and bones of our brothers and sisters, goblins lured here and used to strengthen the witches' powers. We do this as much for their memory as for them ourselves." With a roar of vengeance, the goblin army mounted their motorcycles and swarmed into the Chateau de Millefleur's outer fields. There were hundreds of them, top hats tumbling off their heads, a fleet of exiled Londoners far from home. Motorcycles zipped and weaved around Anouk and the others, and the danger of it caught in her throat, the roar of vengeance making her breath quicken. Her hair flew around her head, and at last goblin motorcycles disappeared through the break in the hedge. She ran a short ways after them, stopping at the first fields, watching the dust rise in their wake as they rode toward the chateau. Cricket joined her, breathless. "This is it." Anouk glanced at her friend. "You finally get a chance to tear the world apart." There had been a time when Cricket would have smiled grimly at the idea of slashing through the highest members of the Hote, but she didn't smile now. "Cricket?" Cricket shook her head. "That goblin is right. It can't just be about destruction. After all this is finished, if we succeed in tearing down the Hote, you and I are going to have to put it back together again. Better." Two more motorcycles roared. Bo and Hunter Black pulled up on either side of them. Luke rode on the back of Hunter Black's motorcycle. He was sweating badly in the sun, blinking with eyes that still weren't quite used to bright daylight. "Are you sure you've recovered enough for this, Luke?" Anouk asked. "I am, if you're sure it's worth the risk." She shoved her fist in her jacket pockets. There's no turning back now." She and Cricket climbed onto Bo's motorcycle, and the five of them brought up the rear of the army. As the engines revved, she felt Viggo's blood quicken in her limbs. It made for a heaty feeling, almost like having a secret. No royal or witch had ever consumed this much human blood and lived. She tried to imagine the look on Malazola's face when the simple maid overpowered her. Then maybe the Hote would understand that they couldn't play with humans or animals or anyone. Living things weren't toys for their pleasure, but her determination wavered as they approached the chateau. The beautiful stillness that enveloped them on their first visit was gone now. There was smoke everywhere. Goblins were screaming. They were fighting against some sort of army that Anouk couldn't make out in the smoke. But what army? It was supposed to be only Zola and Petra and a handful of lesser royals. Bo cut the engine. She jumped off, coughing. The smoke was clearing, and she wasn't certain of what she was looking at. It was a scene from a nightmare. Giant soldiers made of wood were stalking the garden in pursuit of goblins. They towered 10 feet high. Their bodies were formed of spindly branches, their legs powerful trunks, their hands like many-fingered roots. Smoke rose from their wooden shoulders. She spotted one that was only half burned. His arms and head were bare wooden branches, but his lower half was covered in manicured leafy green. "It's the topiaries." Her voice was stunned gargle. "The royals enchanted them to fight, and the goblins are using fire spells against them," Luke said. "But it doesn't look like it's working. The burned wooden skeletons left behind were hideous things. They couldn't be stabbed or shot with arrows, and there was no flesh to them." She watched, stunned, as one lumbering wooden soldier snatched up a goblin in a neon dress and twisted her body in a terrible way. Her screams died along with her. As the smoke continued to clear, the horror grew. More bodies on the ground, bleeding out in the soil, crushed like autumn leaves, broken goblins, dead goblins. Bo looked stricken. What about the Vitae Echo? The royals aren't doing the killing, Luke said tensely. The wooden soldiers are killing on their behalf. The right spell could reverse someone turned to stone, but not even the greatest spell can bring back the dead. Look! Bo pointed out to a team of goblins who were fighting back one by the fountains. They had surrounded one topiary soldier and were throwing out rotting spells to wither its branches. It was working, but slowly. Without warning, a hiss of magic came from every direction at once. Anouk felt it sizzle in the air and spun around. A chubby goblin 20 paces away had turned to stone. 1 minute he was flesh and blood and golden eyeliner, and then he was an awful granite statue, immobile, a perpetual scream frozen on his lips. She had to blink to make sure she was seeing straight. Anouk felt a shiver as another wave of magic shot by them. A few paces to their left, another goblin turned to stone. That was powerful magic. With magic. Witch magic. She's close, the Mata. She followed the direction of the magic to the chateau's bell tower. A figure with long black hair wearing a billowing white blouse stood in its open window, next to a young man in frost gray. Zola and Renard. We have to get into the chateau, she said. More sparkling streaks of magic shot out from various high windows. Beautiful faces loomed there, a handful of lesser royals, counts and duchesses, eager to impress their prince. They wouldn't make it easy. And then Anouk's eyes caught on the bear, Toblerone. He had followed Tenpenny down the path through the wee fields and was now standing at attention by a crumbling stone wall, awaiting another order. The bear, she called to the beasties, climb on its back. They ran through the battlefield. Cricket whispered her cutting spell to chop off wooden arms before the soldiers could grab them. Hunter Black hung back to his blue flame spell and set one giant's leg on fire, while the others reached Toblerone and used his branches like a ladder to climb onto his back. Anouk helped Luke climb up and straddle the trunk that formed his spine. The bear started lumbering toward the chateau. Anouk wove her fingers into the twiggy bones, holding on with one hand. Toblerone barged straight through the battle, though goblins casting whispers and wooden soldiers that exploded in flurries of splinters. Anouk tipped her head up, squinting at the bell tower. She was too far away to see Zola's and Renard's faces, but she hoped they could see hers. The most dangerous thing in all of France, she thought, is me. Hunter Black, come on, Cricket called. As Toblerone neared the house, Hunter Black climbed up the fountain, frigid water soaking his clothes, and leaped onto the side of the bear next to Anouk. He started to slip, but she grabbed his hand, catching him at the last minute. He was soaked. There was a terrible moment when she felt his hand slip out of hers, until Luke suddenly clutched him too and pulled him out of his coat, which fell to the ground. Together they helped him climb onto the bear's back. Nice of you to join us, Luke said breathlessly. He only growled, I like that coat. At last Toblerone reached the heavy wooden door of the chateau. His claws tore at the wood, splintering and shredding it. Behind them, the battle raged on. Every scream made her cringe. She could stop this, save all the goblins, put an end to the topiaries. Didn't she owe the goblins that? But the victory would be short-lived. She had to save her magic for Renard and Zola. Toblerone reared up on its hind legs and threw his full weight at the door. The boards gave way beneath him. Splintered wood flew everywhere. He fell to his feet, and the whole earth seemed to vibrate. Petra stood in the entryway, as if she'd been waiting for them. She was casually smoking a cigarette, as though enchanted shrubbery often crushed through her front door. But Anouk could see beyond the act. The hand that held the cigarette was trembling. You shouldn't have come back, Petra said. She's nothing. Hunter Black growled. A witch's girl. A pretty. She can't do magic. Petra put out the cigarette with her boot, and then took a rifle from behind her back. Maybe not, but I can use a gun. Chapter 36. 9 hours of new enchantment remain. Petra, Anouk gasped, put down the rifle, we're not enemies. And yet you've broken into my house and brought an army of goblins with you. I expect something different from a friend. Say, cake. She aimed the rifle. Now climb down from there. They descended the topiary bare with no sudden movements. Anouk dropped to the floor. I was loyal to a witch too once, she told her. I loved her, but she was rotten somewhere deep. The Vitae echo eats them away inside. It destroys their minds. It makes them power hungry. They think the pretties are like livestock, theirs to command, and the same with us and the goblins. Do you think you're any different? Petra cocked the rifle. You're the one making this black and white, not me. I helped you before because I liked you. And believe it or not, I'm helping you still. I've been around these people my whole life, Zola. Renard. I know what they're capable of. You have to believe me. There's no way out of this that doesn't end in you begging Renard for your life. You want us to surrender. I want you to survive. Footsteps sounded behind them, and they turned to find Countess Quine coming down the hallway, lips freshly stained with powder, dressed in an ornate snow-white gown, as though to flaunt the fact that capturing them would be so easy that she could do it in formal wear. I can handle it from here, she purred. Petra, go and tell the prince they've been captured. He'll want the lesser royals to tie them up. But Petra didn't lower the rifle. Not until we get them locked in the cellar. They're smarter than you think. Countess Quine's expression indicated she doubted that. Cricket looked at Anouk with a question on her face. They were utterly trapped, Quine behind them, Petra in front. Anouk's mind scrolled through all of Vittoria's spells, searching for something small that wouldn't use up much of Vigo's blood. Then, to her surprise, Hunter Black raised his hands in surrender. Anouk gaped. Bo elbowed the assassin and hissed, Did that ice-cold water freeze your brain? You heard her, Hunter Black growled back. She said she's going to lock us in the cellar. He winked. Hunter Black never winked. Countess Quine hadn't seen it, but Anouk had, and though she had no idea what plan was tumbling around in his brain, she raised her hands too. Bo and Cricket stared at her like she'd gone mad, but then Luke raised his hands, following her lead with a trusting nod, and Bo and Cricket warily did the same. Excellent. The Countess smirked as she herded them down the hallway, with Petra bringing up the rear with a rifle. Through the narrow windows, Anouk could hear the sounds of the battle outside, cries for help, clanking metal. Her stomach revolted as if she'd eaten rotten eggs. How many goblins were wounded, dead? Every step she took toward the cellar, she felt more and more despair, and then without warning she didn't feel anything at all. The cellar stairs had just vanished as though by magic. There was nothing beneath her feet, and suddenly she was falling. She crashed into Bo in front of her, and Luke slammed into her from behind. She kept sliding, kicking her feet, trying to grab hold of something, but her fingers glanced off every stone, and the whole group tumbled out of the stairwell and through the wine cellar door to collapse in a messy, painful heap. Someone moaned. Someone else cursed. She caught a glimpse of a glass shoe attached to a petite foot that must have been Countess Quine's. Saw Luke's face smushed into Bo's stomach. Smelled cigarette smoke on Petra's breath just inches from her. Heard the scrape of metal. The rifle! She and Petra scrambled for it at the same time, and Hunter Black reached it first. He was standing outside the cell, standing, not a part of their tumbled mess. What did you do to the stairs? Petra cried. Hunter Black aimed the rifle in the general direction of the knot of bodies, unable to get a clear shot at either Petra or Countess Quine. The last time I was locked in this cell, I had a lot of time to think, and those wooden stairs are only for cedary. It's an old form of carpentry, constructed with rope and joinery. The rope was all but disintegrated, which meant the only thing holding the entire staircase together was this piece of wood. He held up a wooden pin the length of his thumb. Pull it out, the rope snaps, and it all comes crashing down. Since when is an assassin an expert on carpentry? Petra demanded. You'd be amazed how many ways there are to kill someone and blame it on faulty workmanship. He gestured with his free hand. Anouk, Cricket, Luke, Bo, come on. Anouk disentangled herself from Cricket's arm and Countess Quine's silk dress. Hunter Black extended his free hand to help her up. Bo dusted off his clothes and grinned at Hunter Black. I think that's the first time I've seen you do something vaguely heroic. It's like you're actually almost human, Luke teased. Yeah, our hero, Cricket taunted, ruffling Hunter Black's hair, which elicited the expected growl, though there were no teeth in it this time. Trapped in the cellar with the Countess, Petra scowled at Hunter Black. You're not a pretty. You can't fire that gun. You don't know what we can do, he answered. Nobody does. Until 2 days ago, even I would have laughed if you'd told me we could cast whispers. He cocked the rifle. Do you want to risk it? Petra's expression turned very serious as she faced Anouk. Listen, you're going to get yourselves killed unless you give this up. There are other ways to stay human. Her voice wasn't unkind. By siding with Renard? Anouk shook her head. We're no one's pawns. Luke and Bo leaned against the heavy wine cellar door until it slammed shut, and they locked Petra and the Countess in. Petra didn't resist, but Countess Quine hurled herself against the door, though the lock mechanism had long ago been secured with Madazola's own magic, and no amount of whispering could open it. Anouk tossed one last look to Petra behind the bars. The witch's girl sat against the wall, legs folded under her, a nasty look on her face, but it was aimed at the Countess, as if Quine was the last person she wanted to be imprisoned with. Her eyes shifted to Anouk and softened. Good luck, then. Returning to the kitchen required more than a little skill shimmying to scale a staircase with no stairs. Once they made it, Anouk hurried to the kitchen window and stood on tiptoe. Outside, remnants of smoke hung over the gardens. The battle was still raging. Sparks of magic wielded by the lesser royals stationed at various windows sizzled across the gardens. Despite the awful sight of slain goblins in the grass, it looked like the goblins might be getting the upper hand. The remaining ones had formed a stronghold near the potting shed, and magicked a swarm of termites to go after the wooden soldiers. Anouk and the others started for the rear hallway, but they hadn't gone 3 steps before a shadow crossed their path. Lady Metha materialized by the kitchen door. Her fingers sparked with magic, her lips were stained with powder. Anouk and the others scrambled backward. My eucalyptus supply is down to dust, Cricket whispered in a rush. Hunter Black, your borage? Lost with my coat. Bigo's blood throbbed in Anouk's body, but she didn't dare use it up on anyone other than Zola or Renard. Right, then run, she commanded. The 5 of them bolted down the central hall. Lady Metham followed. She didn't deign to run, she simply swallowed powder and then projected herself 20 feet ahead, cutting off the beasties. Anouk skittered to a stop just as Lady Metham swiped a silver dagger at her throat, missing by only a hair. Luke grabbed at Anouk and they ran down a side hall, but Lady Metham projected herself there too, blocking the exit. Don't you know when you've lost, beasties? Lady Metham taunted. Tell the blade in your shoulder that we've lost, Cricket spat. Lady Metham looked down at her pristine dress with a frown. What blade? Even before she'd finished speaking, Cricket had drawn and thrown a blade. It sank into Lady Metham's left shoulder with perfect precision, and she released it with a strained cry. Blood poured down the side of her dress, staining the gossamer fabric. She reached for her powder. Anouk got a dark premonition. Changa, Changa, Lady Metham spat in Cricket's direction with eyes that were blazing with fury. A form of her own. Anouk recognized the spell with a gasp. No! Cricket, run! But it was too late. Cricket had nowhere to go. They were pinned in by the walls on 3 sides, and Lady Metham on the 4th. With a whisper and a twist of her hands, Lady Metham cast out an aura of sparkly magic which floated to surround Cricket. Cricket swatted at the magic glimmers as if they were gnats, clawing at the places where they hit her, but the magic clung to her. Wherever the sparks touched her skin, it rippled and puckered. Her left arm contorted, and she screamed and clutched at it. Long white hairs sprang up from the scratch marks she carved into her own skin. More white hairs sprouted around her neck and spread down her chest. Her curly brown hair was now threaded with white, and her chest contorted too, folding in on itself. Her screams changed to yowls. Anouk couldn't watch. Clammy sweat poured over her brow, and her mouth was suddenly dry. Her greatest fears, the things she'd not even dared to think about in midnight hours, were happening before her eyes, and she couldn't stop it. With every yowl she felt an equal pain in her own chest, as though it were her changing too. And then the crackling magic stopped. Anouk dared to open her eyes, and her stomach plummeted. There it was, a white cat from the painting. Long, pearl-white hair, a fluffy tail with a crook at the tip. Her knees buckled. The cat. It wasn't Cricket. Not any more. There was nothing of Cricket's wit or love of pretty candy, nothing of her twinkling eyes. At least death was final. This somehow worse, a body that continued existing in this awful twisted form. Bo caught Anouk in his arms, tried to turn her face away, but her gaze was fixed on the cat. It started to lick some paw. Back in the oubliette, one of the 5 pelts would be gone now, dissipated into the other, magically returned to the flesh and bones of its original owner. Anouk turned on Lady Metham sharply. "You, Putain!" The lady was slumped against the wall. Her face was pale. There was a light sheen of sweat across her forehead. It had taken much for her to perform such a complex spell. Anouk suspected that somewhere beneath that dress a kidney or her liver had turned to stone, but she wore a grimly satisfied smile. "That's one little kitty, soon to be 4 more animals since Renard gets a hold of you." Anouk felt a sort of madness come over her as she stared at the cat. In her entire life, short as it had been, she had never experienced such rage, such crackling heat that flushed up her chest and made her whole body shake. I hope you have some other trick up your sleeve," Luke whispered to Hunter Black. "He doesn't have to," Anouk answered in a deathly voice. "I do." Her anger drew together, concentrating itself somewhere deep within her unbeating heart. She murmured under her breath, "Anouk, you can't use Aunt Biggo's blood yet," Luke warned, but she was too angry to stop herself. "Just a few drops," she hissed, "for Cricket," she whispered, low and fierce. In the next second Toblerone came charging down the hallway from the foyer, summoned by Anouk's spell. Lady Metham barely had time to register surprise before the bear barreled into her like she was a bowling pin. Lady Metham, already weakened, collapsed, her head knocking against the stone floor with a deadly crack. Blood seeped out. Her eyes were glassy and unmoving. It didn't stop the bear. He began tearing her body with wooden claws until she was nothing but a pile of crimson rags. "I can't watch this," Bo moaned. Anouk stared at the blood pooling on the floor and the bear that tore at Lady Metham's body, and she whispered a quick end to the spell. Both Bo and Luke looked slightly ill, but Hunter Black gave Anouk an approving nod. "Now there are more of us than there are of them. Good." Clinking footsteps came from down the hall, interrupting their victory. "Those are glass shoes. Countess Klein is coming," Luke warned. "She must have gotten out of the cellar." They took off. Their footsteps were drowned out by the sound of her ragged breath. Anouk darted down a hallway that led past rooms full of more portraits, in and out of interconnecting chambers, up and down dark staircases where she could barely see her own hands, and her mind whirled as though she were trapped in a maze. When she finally reached a quiet alcove near the chapel, she dared a glance behind her. Luke was there, but Bo and Hunter Black were gone. She skidded to a stop. "The others, we got separated." A sound in the distance interrupted her, something between a howl and a yell. "Did you hear that?" she asked Luke. The howl came again. It was less like a yell now, more of a growl. "That's an animal," she gasped. "Not the cat, something bigger." Luke's face turned grim as he grabbed her shoulders and prodded her forward. "Keep going." They ran down more hallways until they reached a spiral staircase. The steps were narrow and ancient, worn down from countless footsteps. "This is it," she gasped, "the bell tower." Luke rested a hand on her arm before she could climb the stairs. He peered up at the turret as though he knew where and to whom it led. "Anouk, are you sure about this? It's what we came here to do." He nodded gravely. "Then let's do it." "No," she laid a hand on his chest. "There's nothing you can help me with there, but you can help Bo and Hunter Black. Quine might have trapped one of them." She paused. "That howl." "I know." His tone was somber. He paused a beat before answering the question she hadn't asked. "It came from a wolf." She closed her eyes, fearing the worst. "Not Bo, not Bo, not Bo. It's Hunter Black," he said. Her eyes snapped open. "How do you know that?" 3 years ago, goblins dragged in a wolf caught in the Black Forest, and 2 days later Hunter Black walked out of the attic. He glanced over his shoulder. Countess Klein must have turned him back. She felt a stab of anguish. Hunter Black was family, after all, and in some crazy way she had actually come to care for the sulking assassin. A wolf. Cricket had been right. That was 2 of them turned now. She kept expecting to wake up from this nightmare and be in her bedroom back at the townhouse, tucked snugly beneath a quilt, a book fallen open by her side. But this was no dream. Go, she said, find Bo and Tenpenny in December. Luke kissed the twin hearts painted on her cheeks and squeezed her tight. Stay safe, Dust Bunny. You too, Luke. She climbed one stair, then another, trying to move quietly, but deafened by her own raspy breath. She ran her shirt sleeve over her face, and it came away with sweat and smeared red lipstick from her cheeks. It made her think of Tenpenny and how the night before she told him that it was their choices that made them human, not their bodies, and he had said that tails had something to do with it too. She almost let out a delirious laugh. Cricket, a cat, Hunter Black, a wolf. No choices they could make now would keep them human. But she still had choices. Des forma humana, fisca et scala animo, she whispered to herself, rehearsing the words of the contrabeastie spell. She wouldn't let Renard catch her unprepared this time. The door to the chamber at the top of the bell tower was made of plain wood, not ornate wrought iron over mahogany like the ones downstairs. There wasn't even a lock, just simple latch. Press it and the door would open. She knew what waited on the other side. Matazola and Prince Renard, of course, but something else. She could feel it, that dark thing that she feared looking at too closely, the animal inside her that was always hungry, always awake. For as long as she'd been alive, she kept that other self at a distance. But once she stepped across this threshold, she'd have no choice but to embrace it. She pressed the latch and opened the bell tower door. We have about probably 30 pages left of the book right now. I'm surprised that it's actually only been an hour and 37 minutes. I would have thought it would be 2 hours by now. That's cool, actually. That's not bad. Chapter 37. And 8 hours of new enchantment remain. They were waiting for her. They stood in the round turret in front of open windows that looked down over the chateau's gardens, where the battle was still being fought. The bell loomed from a ceiling joist, nearly as tall as she was and 10 times her weight. Wire cages for Marazola's crows, empty now, hung on hooks from the ceiling. The cries of the battle below sounded distant, as though it were happening in some other world. This must be how the royals always felt in their elevated homes, far removed from the suffering of their people. Matazola had always been beautiful, and she and Renard together looked like gods out of Luke's stories. Those tappeta eyes of Renard's were swallowing Anouk up once more, regarding her the same way that Luke's had when he'd been freed from the oubliette, as though she had changed in the short time they'd been apart, and he was trying to put his finger on exactly what was different about her. She wasn't sure if Renard liked what he saw. Messy hearts painted on her cheeks, the Faustine jacket wearing determination on her face like the goblins wore makeup, but he didn't take his eyes off her. What are your friends? Sorry, where are your friends, little beastie? Matazola asked. You are all alone. I don't need them, not for this, the witch smirked. You were clever to extend your enchantment for an extra day, but you can't buy yourself any more time, not unless you surrender to us, and then perhaps we can discuss how much each hour of humanity is worth to you. I don't want hours, Anouk said. I don't want days. I want a lifetime, and I'm going to have it. Renard folded his arms, looking perplexed. I cannot understand why someone so bold would refuse to serve her creator. We are the same, you and I. You didn't create me, she spat. Matavitora did, and she learned too late what happens when you mistreat a beastie. She took the spell out of her pocket and held it up. Matazola laughed at the scrap of paper. She didn't seem to know what it was, and a paper didn't seem like much of a threat, but Renard didn't laugh. I told you, he said hoarsely. That spell is useless without one of us to cast it for you. You haven't the Silentium box fluency necessary for such a complex spell. Not for the beastie spell, that's true, Anouk admitted, but I'm talking about the spell on the back. The one that is simple enough even for me. A flicker of confusion crossed Matazola's face. She looked for guidance from Renard, but he ignored her, every ounce of his attention focused on Anouk and the spell. What is she talking about? Anazola whispered. Anouk brandished the spell like a weapon. One of you is going to cast the beastie spell and keep us human. That is, if you want to stay human too. That is a contra spell. It will turn anyone, even a witch or a royal, into an animal. I can't say which animal. The spell chooses, not the caster, just as we had no choice what type of humans we become. She paced in a slow circle around the bell tower. If you don't recast the beastie spell on the 5 of us permanently, I will cast the spell on the 2 of you. You haven't the skill, the witch said simply. Renard, however, remained quiet. I haven't trained at one of the witch academies, no, Anouk said. I wasn't born into magic, like the royals. All I've learned are spells overheard from Mata Vitora and a few goblin tricks. But this spell is simple. It requires nothing but tremendous amount of life essence. Now Matasola really wasn't smiling. You would have to take a human life to acquire that much blood. You wouldn't do that. You're too tender-hearted. Anouk thought of Vigo and said softly, Not all life magic has to be taken by force. A commotion came from the stairs. Anouk whipped around. Someone was coming. For a second her confidence faltered. Countess Quine appeared with Luke in tow, her hair mussed as though they'd been in a struggle. Luke's hands were bound with twine. A bruise marked his dark cheek. Anouk sucked in a breath. Luke, are you all right? But he wasn't. Anyone could see. Matazola smirked again, her confidence restored. Good, he can be witness to this. Quine, our little dust mop says she's going to turn us into animals if we don't obey her. Go ahead, dust mop. Show us how you do that. Anouk loathed the smirk on the witch's face. It itched at her with blade-sharp claws, just like the sounds of the battle outside. Renard grabbed Luke and jerked his head at Quine. Go, handle the driver. He's the only one left. Bo. Anouk turned to grip the window ledge, searching the battle. She caught sight of Tenpenny's top hat. He was crouched behind a garden wall near the goblin's potting shed stronghold. A dozen or so more goblins huddled with him, trying to break the spell that locked the shed door. And then a sandy-haired boy in a white chauffeur shirt and black trousers sprinted toward the goblins, jumped over a fallen wooden soldier, and joined them behind the wall. A streak of magic tore across the garden, turning the kilted goblin that Cricket had danced with to stone. Anouk whipped her head around. It was Quine. She was below now, in the shelter of the porte cochere, eating powder and casting spells. Bo, watch out, Anouk yelled, but he couldn't hear her. He was so far away. He was slamming his umbrella against the lock, unaware that his back was exposed, and the Countess Quine was swallowing more powder. Bo! Her cry was hoarse. But just as Countess Quine's next bolt hurtled across the garden, Tenpenny heard Anouk's call and spun around to see what was happening. In a few long strides, he got to the shed and shoved Bo out of the way. Bo landed against the stone wall, his shoulder connecting hard enough to make Anouk bristle. The bolt of magic clipped Tenpenny in the hip. Anouk cried out. It spread from his hip with alarming speed, immobilizing his legs and his chest, swallowing his neck and head, finally reaching the hand that was still outstretched to protect Bo. In only seconds he was transformed from the leader of the exiled goblins to a mass of colorless granite. Anouk gasped. One of the wooden soldiers wrapped in its root-like fingers around Tenpenny's stone body, and with one swift motion lifted the statue off the ground and slammed it against the wall. It shattered into dust and pieces. Anouk had to steady herself on the windowsill. Her lungs felt robbed of air, like she'd forgotten how to breathe. A statue could be whispered back to life, but there was no returning from rubble and dust. Tenpenny was gone. She clutched the ledge hard enough to leave imprints. No! Below, Countess Quine aimed at Bo again. He was leaning against the stone wall, looking dazed from the fall. He could never get up and run in time. She was going to turn him to stone, too. In that moment, reason disappeared. She'd never let Bo become a pile of rubble. She raised her hands toward the window. Luke called out a warning before Renard could silence him, but she barely heard him. Hot anger was slick between her ears. It deafened her, controlled her. She channeled every ounce of Vigo's blood, every bit of her love for Bo, no longer needing Renard's belief in her because she believed in herself. Bomba ac inis bleu, she whispered grimly. It was quiet. That was the thing about magic. It was best done with whispers, not shouts. And her one whisper, bolstered with the strength of 6 pints of lifeblood, sent a shockwave over the gardens. The lavender of the fields rippled as though a hurricane had passed through. Buds, stripped from the plants, rose in the air like a dusky purple cloud. The goblins fell to their knees from the tremor. Each of the wooden soldiers, one by one, burst into blue flames. The smell of wood smoke mixed with the lavender. As hot flames turned their wooden bones to ash, a hideous scream pierced the air as Countess Quine sizzled along with them. Just like that, the battle outside was over. Won. Renar and Mata Zola were caught in a stunned silence. Luke, too. Zola ran to a window and leaned out over her charred fields and her ashen soldiers, her garden overrun by the surviving goblins. Her fingers curled into claws on the windowsill as she let out a furious cry. Renar, though, didn't seem angered by Countess Quine's death. Instead, he regarded Anouk with something like amazement, and that felt somehow far more dangerous. Goosebumps sprang up from her head to her 8 toes. It crashed down on her then. A mistake. That impulsive burst of anger had saved Bo and won the battle, but it had cost her every drop of Vigo's life's essence. It felt as though the bones in her legs momentarily vanished and she had to catch herself on a low wooden beam. A wave of lightheadedness made her see stars. She licked her lips, forcing herself to stand straight. She couldn't let them see how weak it had made her. They had to believe she was still strong enough to carry through the contra beastie spell, even though in her hands and her lips she felt an awful numbness. Her magic was all but gone, and there was no flowers in the bell tower, no butterflies, not even a spider to swallow down. Zola raked her nails through her hair as she spun away from the window. The Tor didn't kill your kind soon enough. I won't make that mistake. Anouk took a shaky step backward, glanced to the door. Could she make it in time? What about Luke? She couldn't leave him wrists bound at the prince's mercy. Zola raised her hands toward Anouk, but then paused. She saw how Anouk was throwing worried looks at Luke, and smiled grimly. She turned toward Luke instead. Fresh panic thrummed in Anouk's body. Not Luke! She bolted around the edge of the bell tower to stop the witch, but she was too weak, too slow. Zola whispered low, and a dark cloud began to surround Luke, crackling and sparkling just as it had for Cricket. Prince Renar grabbed Anouk's arm and pulled her away from the magic cloud. Anouk, don't. His voice was quiet in her ear. Get too close and you'll be caught in the same spell. But his words felt distant. What did it matter if she sprouted fur or feathers when so many of her friends had already turned? Luke, she cried, but it was too late. The change had already started. The cloud of sparkling light obscured him, but she could make out his limbs shrinking, the twine binding his wrists dropping to the floor. Fine gray fur clouded like smoke around him, the smallest pelt from the obelite, transported here by magic, and began to weave itself onto his bare arms. She fought against the Prince Renar's grasp, trying to muster enough magic to save Luke, but she was spent. The whispers on her lips had no life behind them. As soon as the spell was done, Zola cried out, clutching her side. A slash of pain twisted her face. Something had soured in her, just as it had when Lady Metham pushed herself to do the same spell. Maybe her lungs, maybe her bowels, but not her heart. Her heart had turned stone long ago. The dark clouds surrounding Luke began to dissipate. Where her friend had been, all 6 feet of him, there was simply nothing. Confused, she dropped her eyes to the bell tower floor, and she stifled a cry. A mouse was left in its place. First Cricket, then Hunter Black, now Luke. And outside Tenpenny was gone. Dozens of goblins were dead. And Bo! Anouk glanced out the window, almost afraid to see what might have happened to Bo. Smoke was rising from the smoked topiaries, but there, Bo was on his hands and knees, but moving, alive. He crawled slowly toward the chateau, one arm streaked with blood, despite the pain twisting her features. Zola lurched forward to catch the mouse and stuff it into one of the wire crow cages. What? No more magic? She coughed. Can't you save your friend with all that lifeblood you've been bragging about? Anouk's gaze fell to the caged mouse. In hours, would she herself be the same? A dog, she thought dimly, or an owl. There would be no more Anouk. It didn't matter that she'd proven herself to be more than a maid, and her promise to help the goblins retake London? Worthless. She sank to the floor, her legs like wobbly jam. She felt as weak as Vigo had looked when he was almost drained of blood. Matazola unhooked another of the crow cages. Do you want to do the honors, Renar, or shall I? She asked. Renar's eyes were flashing again. Yet they held no mercy. A girl in tatters on his floor stirred no pity in him, and yet she wasn't just some helpless girl. He still wore that odd look of curiosity he'd had when she'd cast the spell to stop the battle. Those words came back to her. He's fascinated by you. You have something he lost long ago. Youth. Wonder. Yes. I'll handle this, he said simply. He raised a hand, a gesture as simple as waving away a fly, and cast a spell with a flick of his first 2 fingers. Only it wasn't directed at Anouk. The times she had cast the sleeping spell on Bo, she had been struck by how instantly it took effect. There had been no yawning, no heavy eyelids, no graceful slump into a chair. No sooner had the whisper left her lips than Beau's head had connected to the floor with an audible crack. The motto fell the same way. One moment she was standing, and the next she was lying on her back on the turret floor. No scream, no moan, just small wisps of dust rising in the air, and the vibration from her collapse still traveling through Anouk's ankles. The thunk had been heavy enough to cause the crows perched outside to take wing. The witch's eyes were open, empty. Her chest did not rise and fall. Not a sleeping spell this time. It was the second time in 3 days Anouk had seen a dead witch. She thought of them as invincible. Next to witches, she had always felt like a fluttery little gnat beside ancient willows, an inconsequential, ephemeral thing, and yet she had outlived both Matavatora and Matazola. She had mourned the death of the first. The death of the second brought her only a feeling of increasing dread, a tightening hollowness where her pulse should have been, because the crown prince of the Shadow Royals did not take a witch's life and spare hers without a reason. Now that it's just the two of us, Prince Renard said, rolling up his shirt sleeves over sinewy forearms, I really think you should reconsider my offer. Chapter 38. 7.5 hours of new enchantment remain. The witch's body blocked Anouk's path to the door. There would be no escape. In the time it took her to move one step, Renard could send her tumbling to the floor with lifeless eyes just like Matazola. A gust of wind blew through the turret windows, carrying notes of lavender and ash. To be a crow, she thought with a stab of longing, able to take wing and fly away. But that was impossible, too. Even the crows were under Renard's control. Renard clutched at his right leg, wincing. Anouk frowned. She hadn't seen any injury. There had been no bullets or falling objects, but his fingers pressed against his thighs as though something inside were fighting to tear through, and a memory came to her. Once, in a fit of anger, Madame Vitora had used magic to kill a pretty who'd knocked her over in the street. Almost at once, the Vitae echo had doubled back on her, crumpling her body like cardboard, and she'd clutched at her side in the same grasping way. Later, Anouk had overheard Luke researching herbs that might reverse a liver turned to clay. Sweat dripped from Renard's brow. His breath was coming fast. Slowly, he let go of his leg and straightened, but there was something unnatural to the way he stood now, as though the leg weren't a leg anymore, but something heavy and stiff like stone. The Vitae echo, she said, realizing what had happened. Because you took a life. His only answer was a grimace. Why? He knelt next to the fallen witch. With a touch of powder on his lips and a whisper, the golden bracelet around Matazola's wrist fell to the floor. He picked it up and pulled it in his palm. Because she isn't the princess I need. His eyes met hers, and she felt a jolt of dangerous exhilaration. You are, Anouk. She nudged the witch's body with her toe and spat, No, merci. I've seen what you do with your brides. His lips curved. Fair enough, but remember that your raw magic is far more powerful than mine. You could kill me 10 times over before I'd even get out the first syllable of a whisper, once you're trained, that is. Behind him, the caged mouse who had been Luke twitched its whiskers anxiously, its big black eyes fearful. Renard didn't spare it a glance. Her anger solidified once more. He didn't care about Luke or anyone else but himself. Your time is over, she said firmly. His eyes flashed their dark sheen. So young you are, the world must seem so clear to you, like black and white drawings in a book. I envy that certainty. Don't you think I have asked myself countless times if our time is past? Each surge of pretty development I have watched their ingenuity with respect and thought, that perhaps at long last they were ready to stand on their own, and yet each time I've also been witness to the catastrophic results. Do you know what coincides with each of their advancements? She didn't answer, nor did he seem to expect her to. War. Pretty wars that have nothing to do with us. War between pretties who have and those who haven't, between those who believe in gods and those who don't, between those who live on the sides of border they invented. Those wars led to massive deaths, poverty, and inequality that we've been trying to rebalance ever since. But every time we shape a better world for the pretties, their instinct is to drive it into chaos again. That's their nature. They are like children governed by primal emotions, jealousy, fear, greed. If we didn't control them, they would destroy themselves. He poured the golden bracelet from palm to palm in a way that made a soft musical jangle that she found oddly hypnotic until reason snapped her back to herself. The Hote is no better, she spat. The goblins live like paupers. The witches oversee the goblins, not I. But you command the witches. If you'd ever bother to step out of your penthouse palace, you'd see how unfairly all your lesser creatures are treated. But you care only about maintaining your power. Abruptly he stopped toying with the bracelet. You're right. It was the last thing she'd expected to hear, and her thoughts hung mid-breath. She sensed that there was a catch. As formidable a princess as you'd make, you would also be a compassionate, and that is what the world needs. And in return, I'll be whatever you want me to be. The prince for the fairy tales that pretties tell each other. The prince from those playbills you have pasted to your bedroom walls. I know what you are. A dreamer. I can be a dreamer, too. He paused, eyes flashing. I'm offering you anything you can imagine and more. He went to the turret window, limping on his right leg, and extended his hand to let the bracelet that had been Zola's shackle fall. Then he came to her, hands open, a bold look in his eyes. Say yes, for you and for me, for the pretties and for the Hote. In that moment, he was once more the boy in the too big scarf who had stood on her doorstep. Despite all the centuries he had lived, he didn't look much older than her. And maybe that hopeful boy was still in there somewhere, someone not so different from her, caught up in a dangerous world of magic and trying to make right what he could. The arrogant mask he so often wore was slipping now, and beneath it she saw a glimpse of vulnerability. He truly needed her, she realized. He couldn't save his kingdom without her. His eyes were brimming with something that was both soft and wary. Prince Renard wasn't so cold after all. Without warning, a teapot came flying from the direction of the stairs and crashed into the giant bell. She clamped her hands over her ears against the deafeningly loud tolls. December emerged from the doorway with her golden teeth bared and her yellow braids whipping like serpents. She pulled a pouch from her vest and poured out a shimmering substance, and instead of swallowing it, she blew it into Renard's face. He coughed, waving it away, and scratched the places on his arms where the shimmering dust clung to his skin. What is this? He snarled. This is a bold and daring rescue, obviously, December cried, and then turned and called to someone. Now, release it. Two goblins were in the stairwell. At December's signal, they released something gray that tore out from the stairs, snarling. Wolf, Anouk thought with a jolt. And then, half a second later, Hunter Black. A broken chain dangled from the wolf's neck. Anouk felt as though everything was happening too quickly, like time had suddenly sped up. Four strong paws, a snapping jaw, keen black animal eyes. Tension rippled in the air. The wolf growled low, its angry gaze going from Anouk to Renard and back, and she had an awful premonition. Hunter Black was an animal now, and she was prey. But then the wolf looked at her, really looked at her. Did a glimmer of him remain beneath that fur? It was impossible, she knew, and yet slowly the wolf's gaze shifted away from Anouk and to the crown prince. Its lips drew back in a silent snarl. Still clawing at the mysterious powder on his neck and face, Renard reacted a second too slowly. He reached for his own powder, but the wolf's haunches buckled, and it leaped clear across the bell tower. It sank its teeth into Renard's arm. The prince didn't cry out, didn't flinch. If it were for the paleness spreading up his neck, Anouk wouldn't have even known he felt the pain. Renard dug his fingers into the wolf's neck and tried to wrench it off, but its teeth sank deeper. He couldn't get to his powder. The wolf whipped its head around like it was thrashing a rabbit in its jaws. Any other day, Renard might easily have overpowered the wolf, but he wasn't used to the weight of his stone leg. He tripped and fell back against the wall. Anouk felt the urge to run to the wolf, to help. They were a family, and that's what family did. Hunter Black had never been able to fully embrace that fact while human. He was always the solitary assassin, the lone wolf, but in the past few days she'd seen him change. December grabbed Anouk's hand. The wolf won't keep him down for long. Hurry, out of the window. The window? It was a 30-foot fall. No, I can't leave him and Luke. The mouse? Footsteps sounded on the spiral stairs. The other two goblins drew knives, preparing to hold off the lesser counts and duchesses. The wolf suddenly let out a sharp yip of pain. Renard slammed it against the wall. Blood trickled from its left eye. With his free hand, Renard tore open his vial of powder and swallowed it dry. Versic sang. Anouk stared in horror as blood appeared at the corner of the wolf's mouth like thick crimson drool. Renard continued to whisper in a controlled voice, pitting the wolf against the wall with all his weight. Life drained out of it, and messy, wine-colored streaks that stained its beautiful thick fur. The wolf whimpered, its paw scrambled weakly, uselessly. It gave one final whine. Anouk couldn't breathe. No! There had to be a trick she could cast. Leave it! December dragged her away toward the open window. It's too late. The wolf is gone. No! Anouk dug in her heels. We can't! Oh, we can! December embraced her in a macabre bear hug, pitting her arms so she couldn't fight back, and before Anouk could get out another word, before she could look one last time at Hunter Black dying, the goblin tipped them both out the window, and they were falling into a world that smelled of ash. Chapter 39. 7 hours of new enchantment remain. Ouch! For a few breaths, all Anouk could do was stare at the sky and try not to throw up. Waves of pain radiated through her body. She didn't dare move, afraid that she'd discover that her bones had snapped. She could even feel spindly, sharp bones protruding and poking at her legs. Twigs! She lifted her head and found she wasn't broken at all. She had landed on a pile of branches that had once been a topiary soldier that the goblins had killed. She sat up, wincing. December was fishing twigs out of her tangled blonde braids. You shouldn't have done that, Anouk coughed. You're welcome. December rustled leaves off her jacket, pushed herself to her feet, balanced precariously on the pile of hedge clippings, and extended a hand to help Anouk up. They clambered free of the hedge, and Anouk pitched her head back and looked at the bell tower, hoping for some indication that Hunter Black wasn't dead. But it was awfully deafeningly silent, and her hopes slipped away. There was no sign of the prince either, but she could feel his presence. It was like knowing that you weren't alone in a dark room. He was close. He was coming. Nothing she'd seen so far could stop him, except— "What was that magic dust?" she asked, quickly. December tugged the small bag out of her pocket. "It comes from the pretty world. I figured the prince wouldn't know what it was, and so he'd freak out." She handed Anouk the bag and added, "It isn't magic. We use it for parties." Anouk squinted at the words on the package. "Glitter?" December waggled her eyebrows. "It's sparkly." Voices came from somewhere within the chateau. Anouk caught a flash of movement behind the curtains of Madazola's storerooms. She tossed aside the glitter. Dread built itself around her, stacking up like bricks. All they could do was run. Movement near the fountain caught her eye. Someone was trying to sit up. "Beau!" She and December ran across the garden and crouched next to him. Blood poured from the gash in his shoulder, and his right arm looked unnaturally loose, like it was missing half its bones. A merlot-colored bruise covered his jaw, spreading down the sinews of his neck as though something had grabbed him by the throat and lifted him clear off the ground. "I'm okay," he said, though he cringed when he sat up. "At least I will be. The others?" She cringed too. How could she tell them? She could barely hold on to the knowledge herself without shattering like a broken teapot, and then there was the guilt, the awful guilt. She brought them all here. She was responsible. "We have to get out of here," she choked out. "Any moment, the lesser royals are going to throw open those doors and grill us like toast. I've used up all the strength I had from Vigo's blood. We have to run." "And go where?" he asked. She paused. "Back to Paris, to Vigo and the townhouse. The spell it protects it is ancient magic, not the kind that dies with a witch. And the royals won't be able to enter. We'll be safe there. The goblins will too. You'll need this." December tugged on one of her brass chains connected to a small pouch. She took out a vial and pressed it to Anouk's hand. "The antidote to Tenpenny's elixir. You have to drink it before you go from deadish to full dead. It will restart your hearts. Slowly. You won't turn back right away, but it can protect you against midnight. And when midnight strikes," Beau said, "without a witch or a royal to recast the spell," he didn't have to finish. Anouk handed him the vial. "When that happens, if it happens, we'll be together at home." He looked as though he might protest again, but then she saw the exhaustion in him. He was hurt, bleeding. He might be lucky to make it to midnight at all. He uncorked the vial, drank down a dram, and then handed it to Anouk. It tasted foul, that came as no surprise, and yet it had a subtle sweet herbal aftertaste that lingered on her lips, making them tingle, and the sensation traveled all the way down her throat. She pressed a hand to her chest, rubbing life back into her newly awakened heart. "December, spread the word among the goblins who can still drive. Tell them to carry as many wounded as they can back to Paris and meet us at 18 Rue de Amantes. They can take shelter there." December left to tell the survivors, and in seconds the first revs of engines began. Anouk rested a hand on Beau's bruised cheek. "We don't have the Rolls Royce," he coughed. "No, and my arm. I can't steer a motorcycle with only one hand. No, and you can't drive, and the goblins are going to be overloaded with the wounded. So what do we do, Cabbage? Hot air balloon?" She laid a hand on his shirt and smoothed out the wrinkles. "I have a better idea. There's a garage hidden behind the chapel." He leaned toward her so fast that they almost bumped heads. "Cars?" She nodded. "Cabbage, I could kiss you. There will be time for that when we get out of here." She grabbed the lapels of his shirt and pulled him to his feet. His face twisted in a grimace as he hobbled on his left leg, clutching his left arm, which hung too low for his shoulder, the joint protruding unnaturally. Piles of ash billowed columns of smoke that they weaved between, pressing sleeves to their mouths as their eyes burned. Dozens of goblins rushed in a dizzying mob toward the motorcycles, which roared to life one by one. But it was hard to feel relief for the survivors as they hobbled past dozens more bodies on the lawn, limbs twisted like switches of ivy. and glistening white stone statues of goblins who had once danced among the gravestones beneath the streets of Paris. She looked up at the bell tower. Empty now. What happened to Luke and Cricket and Hunter Black? Bo coughed out. It's bad, isn't it? She concentrated on the pillars of smoke, on the dirt path to the garage, anything but those awful animal howls. Anouk turned. She had to spit the word, all of them, and Hunter Black. She swallowed back the bitter heartache. Ironically, tragically, it hadn't been until he'd become an animal that he'd been his most human. I don't think he made it. Bo's feet stopped on their own. A look of surprise passed over his face, and it seemed like he had to force himself to start walking again. And we just leave them? It pulled at her like tiny little thorns in her skin, scratching her up inside. What would the hero in one of Luke's fairy tales do? Charge back in to save his friends? This wasn't a fairy tale. This was a graveyard. Renard put them in cages. If we go back for them now, we'll never get out. But we'll come back for them, she promised. We'll find a way out of this. I know we will. For us and for them. Bo didn't remind her that they themselves were only hours away from turning. He didn't have to. It was a noxious, dense cloud over the both of them. A bolt of light suddenly shot from an upper window. Anouk tugged Bo behind a goblin statue a second before the bolt shattered against the stone. Dust and pebbles rained over their hair and clothes. The lesser royals, Anouk gasped. Another ripple of light was loud past them, close enough to graze Anouk's arm. She cried out. Heat throbbed at her shoulder, but when she pressed her palm to the pain, it came back clean. No blood. The metallic threads in the Faustine jacket had deflected the attack. Tenpenny was right, she said. Fashion is magic. Two more flashes of light erupted from the upper windows, shattering the two nearest statues, one after the other. Bo and Anouk darted from shelter to shelter, crouching behind a fountain, then hiding behind the potting shed. The garage is just to the left of the chapel, Anouk said, her breath shallow. We will have to make a run for it. Are you ready? No, come on. Together they ran across the final exposed stretch of garden between the potting shed and the chateau. White hot streaks lit up the grounds like summer lightning. Fountains exploded in spectacular sprays of rubble that clattered on their backs. And for a second she glanced at the chateau and saw them there, lesser counts and duchesses and baronesses, each one framed in a window, proud and arrogant like their portraits. Anouk, watch out! Bo shoved her with his good shoulder as another flash burned the place she'd been half a second ago. She tumbled to the grass and crawled forward with her heart in her throat until she felt the cool press of a stone at her back, the air once more in her lungs. There, she indicated a row of garage doors. That's it. Bo was already standing on tiptoe and shading his eyes to peer through the window. He made a soft exclamation. Ils sont si belles. You're talking about the cars? Well, and you, Cabbage. He pushed open the window and then made a stirrup of his hands to help her up. She climbed ungracefully through on her stomach, swung a leg over, and dropped down into the garage. Bo climbed in behind her, dusting off his hands. Which one? She asked. In the faint light from the few windows, the cars were like shadowy things from a dream world. His eyes devoured car after car as he ran between them, reverently touching their hoods. The Aston Martin, no, the Bentley. Mon Dieu, is that a Hurricane? She dragged him to the first car. Right, he said, the Aston Martin it is. Mercifully, it was unlocked. Bo slid into the driver's seat and with his good arm searched for the keys behind the visors. In the passenger's side, Anouk checked the glove box. Bo cursed. No keys. They have to be here somewhere. Anouk rifled again through the glove box, pulling out crumpled receipts and unpaid speeding tickets, and looked under the seat but found only a muddy pair of combat boots. A knock at the passenger's side window made them both jump. Petra. In the dim light, her face looked spectral on the other side of the glass. She dangled a set of silver keys. Anouk and Bo exchanged a look. She could still have the gun. Anouk whispered. I can hear you, Petra said, and then tapped on the glass again. These are old 68-pane windows. The glass is not exactly soundproof. With a held breath, Anouk cranked down the window. Petra, she said, if I can just explain, don't bother. Petra tossed the keys into Anouk's lap. She did it so simply, so effortlessly, that Anouk was left with blankness on her tongue. She had expected to spend precious minutes they didn't have making desperate bargains. But take the N7 along the Rhone, Petra said. The traffic's awful this time of day on the E15. Anouk's thoughts crashed back to her, and she sputtered, just like that? Petra leaned on the open car window, and her eyes hooded. You put me in a tough place, Anouk. You wanted me to betray my mother for a group of beasties I barely knew. But she's gone now, and it's Renard's fault. Anouk held up the keys. So you're helping us escape to get back at Bernard? Petra didn't deny it. There was a shadow behind her eyes. She'd lost the person she'd loved most in the world, a particular pain that Anouk knew well. Revenge is as good as a reason as any. And like I said, I like you. She jerked her chin at Bo, and as Anouk handed him the keys, put it in fifth gear on the highway, purrs like a kitten. She let go of the car and started to go, but Anouk grabbed her wrist. Wait! The others. Petra looked away sharply, and for a second Anouk saw her mask fall, revealing a well of deep emotion there. Yeah, I've seen the cages. Promise me you'll take care of them. Petra didn't answer. Promise. Petra's wrist was thin, like Anouk's own, but that didn't mean strength didn't flow through both of them. In the quiet of the garage, Anouk could feel the steady pulse, pulse, pulse of the girl's heartbeat. Petra nodded. I'll do what I can for them. Now get out of here already. She tugged on a cord hanging from the ceiling, and the nearest garage door rose. Bo turned the key, and the Aston Martin roared to life. He threw it in reverse, then pressed the gas, and then they were tearing out of the garage into the garden. Sparking bolts of white-hot magic hurtled at them from all directions, singeing the hood ornament, cracking against the windshield. As they sped through the dirt path between the lavender fields, Anouk dared one last glance at the side mirror of the chateau. A figure stood in the bell tower, silhouetted against the fading sun, heavily favoring one leg. Prince Renard had survived, which meant that Hunter Black probably hadn't. He remained perfectly still as he watched them leave, and even long after they were on the highway back to Paris, Anouk felt velvety tappeta eyes on the back of her neck. Chapter 40. 3 hours of new enchantment remain. They spoke little on the drive back to Paris. What was there to say, Anouk thought, except I'm sorry, Hunter Black, I'm sorry, Cricket, I'm sorry, Luke, and Tenpenny, and all the goblins who died. I'm sorry to you, Bo, and to me because I can't stop midnight. That black cat clock was still ticking away on the dashboard, and somewhere around Grenoble. Bo grabbed it with his good hand and threw it out of the window. Anouk said nothing. She was glad to see it go. No more clocks, no more ticking. She didn't want to know the countdown to the end. If this truly was it, she wanted to spend their last night free of the weight of time. She wanted to curl up in an enormous bed, full of soft pillows. Just Bo and her and Vigo, if Vigo was okay, and drink Malvatoire champagne and drape herself in diamonds and kiss Bo, and oh yes, kiss Bo, that most of all. She squeezed the franc coin necklace, keeping it safe in her fist. When she dropped a coin in the fountain at the end of Rue de Amance, she made a wish to keep them safe. Had the coin worked, or had it been her whisper in the closet that had protected them, or perhaps simply luck? But a coin was all she had now. She leaned forward to look up through the windshield at the moon. We're almost there, Bo said, as though reading her worries. We'll make it before midnight. They entered the city, and Paris didn't disappoint. The clouds had lifted, and the night was velvety black and beautiful. The more she saw of Paris, the more dreamlike it was, and she wasn't sure where the street lights ended and the stars began. She leaned her head against the cool window, watching the blocks roll by one. Cafes and boutiques, pharmacies and patisseries, and above the shops lights were on in the apartments where families watched television and couples snuggled on sofas and mothers taught their daughters to cook coq à vin. She pressed the pads of her fingers to the glass, wanting to touch the city, to taste it, to know all there was to know about everything in the world. They passed a church with a spotlighted spire that drew her eye up to the very top where a clock presided over the streets. She jerked upright abruptly. She couldn't help but see the time. Bo, it's 10 minutes to midnight. The Aston Martin purred beneath him as he whipped around corners, dodging other cars with an easy grace, and then the houses were more familiar. She recognized that gabled rooftop, that dented mailbox. They were on Rue de Amance. Bo started to park, and Anouk was out of the car before they'd even fully stopped. She ran around to his door, threw it open, and tugged him out, away from the house and toward the far end of the lane. Where are you going? With her other hand she clutched her franc necklace, the fountain. An odd look crossed his face, and then his eyes fell to the coin, and a kind of heartbroken sadness filled him, as he realized what she'd hoped foolishly to do. Anouk, it might work, Bo. It might not, but it might. The street lamp threw a halo of light over his face. A face she knew nearly as well as her own, full lips that were like heaven to touch, his almost too big nose, sandy hair that was on way of curling the damp. His features were heavy with doubt, but then little by little the doubt melted away. Before her eyes he became just a boy again. He grinned. All right, let's make a wish. Hand in hand they ran for the wishing fountain at the end of the lane, past the townhouses Anouk had started at dreamily through the windows, past a tiny bulldog with big ears and even bigger bark. Their feet skidded as they ducked into the fountain alleyway. It was darker here, away from the street lights. Blue-black shadows encased the fountain. Starlight reflected on the tinkling water. The gargoyle spat water into the pool, that mischievous half-smile on his face, the one that had once repulsed her but now filled her with affection. She pulled the necklace over her head. How much time was left? 3 minutes? 2? Just 1 coin, Bo said. So it'll work for only one of us. I know, she breathed. It's for you. You're going to stay human. Even in the shadows, she could see his expression harden. He reached for the coin, though she had held it out just out of reach. No, Anouk, no. It's going to be you. She scrambled back, fiercely guarding the coin. Forget it, Bo. I couldn't save the others, but maybe I can save you. She extended her arm over the pool, the coin clutched in her hand. Then he grabbed her around the waist and pulled her away from the water. Let him try to stop her. She'd throw herself into the fountain if she had to. His breath brushed her neck as they scuffled. His arm pressed into her ribs. He was reaching, but not for the coin. His fingers closed around one of the few roses still in bloom that hugged the edge of the fountain, and before she could grasp what he was about to do, he popped it into his mouth. I know only one spell, he breathed, but right now, it's the only one I need. An awful premonition struck her. Bo! No! Dorma, sonora pessimo. For the first time his pronunciation was perfect. It was quiet. It was powerful. He'd mastered the sleeping spell in one single moment when she wanted him to make a mistake. Blackness came first, crackling like ash, then a feeling of falling, his arms around her, lowering her to the ground, the smell of roses on his breath, lips pressed to her cheek, and then she heard it, a splash of a coin, followed by the most awful words in the world. I wish for Anouk to stay human forever. In the distance, bells rang out from the church they had passed on the corner, each chime impossibly loud, impossibly heavy, as though the bells were weighed down by devils. Bong! 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 And then more bells came from more churches on different blocks, tolls that broke the beautiful night with crashing, gnashing, deafening sounds. 12 chimes, even long after the bells had stopped, their vibrations traveled throughout the city, straight into the little alley at the far end of the Rue d'Amance. Midnight had come at last. Chapter 41. Time over. When Anouk woke, the moon shone bright enough to burn her eyes. She rolled over, woozy and foggy-headed, heated, to find ivy crumpling beneath her hands. She heard the sound of tickling water and felt cool night air. Crushed bits of dry leaves clung to her face. For a moment nothing made sense. Her memory was like an unfinished jigsaw puzzle, missing more pieces than it contained. The fountain, a car, then the impossible happened. The moon turned off. She blinked in the bizarre sudden darkness, and then her eyes adjusted and she slowly came to make out 2 people standing in front of her, a young black couple with blue jeans and white sneakers, Americans. The man held a phone to his ear, and when he saw she was awake, he swung it back toward her and shone that bright light again, and she'd mistaken for the moon. They said something in English, but to Anouk's ears it sounded like clunky gibberish. What time is it? She rasped, pressing a hand to her dry throat. But they shook their heads, not understanding her French, and she tapped on her wrist to indicate the question. The man turned his phone around and showed her the time backlit on the screen, 12:59 a.m. The woman's gaze shifted to something behind Anouk, and her face suddenly broke in a smile. She crouched down, making a sound like she was calling to an animal. Anouk pressed a hand to her head. She was at the fountain near the townhouse. The cute spitting gargoyle, she had a coin, she'd come here with Bo, and Bo. She sat up, remembering everything with a rush of panic. The American woman made that inviting noise again. A shadow came out from the corner, a shadow that changed in the phone's light to 2 big brown eyes and a wagging tail and sandy brown fur. It inched forward at the girl's beckoning motion, but stopped a few feet away, hesitant and wary. Anouk found herself staring dumbly at the creature. Dog. A dog. She collapsed backwards, her palms scraping on the bricks, but she felt only numbness. The fountain kept tinkling, and the sound was all she could cling to keep her mind from slipping away. Is he yours? Another girl, a French teenager in a waitress uniform, had joined the Americans and was peering at her strangely. The girl pointed to the dog. Is he yours? She repeated. Anouk grabbed for the dog, some instinct making her pull it close and wrap her arms around it fiercely. Yes, she said, he's mine. Her voice was wild enough that the American couple exchanged a look and then stepped back. The man's phone rang and they used the excuse to walk away at a fast clip. But the French girl knelt down and pressed something cool into Anouk's hand. For luck, the girl said. I was going to throw it in myself, but it looks like you might need it more than me. The girl left, and Anouk stared at the glistening franc in her palm. Still clutching the dog by the scruff of its neck, terrified of letting go, she crawled to the fountain as fast as she could and threw it in the coin. It bounced off the gargoyle and plinked into the water. For Bo to be human again, she whispered in a rush. For Bo to be Bo. She squeezed her eyes closed. She wished harder than she had ever wished in her life. She wished to see his smile again, to run her fingers through his hair, but the fur beneath her hand didn't change to skin. The breath on her face still smelled of dog. She squeezed her eyes shut harder, wishing and wishing and wishing, but when she at last opened her eyes, the dog was still a dog. The pretty girl's coin wasn't magic. It was just an old coin. Besides, it was past midnight. Even if it had been enchanted, it wouldn't have been strong enough to combat the unstoppable force of time. She sank back onto the bricks, pressed her face into her hands. If only I hadn't taught him that spell. A wet nose nudged her cheek. She pulled the dog close and buried her face in his fur, tasting the saltiness of her own tears. She cried because crying was all that she had left. The tears could last only so long, even ones as powerful as these. Finally, she sank back on her heels, wiped her sleeve over her face, and did all she could think to do. "Come on," she said to the dog. "Let's go home." It wasn't until she had climbed the steps of the townhouse and put her hand on the knob that a thought struck Anouk. She stopped moving. Cricket was the cat. Luke was the mouse. Hunter Black was the wolf. Bo was the dog. That left only one pelt. The one that wasn't fur like the others, but had long wings and downy feathers over a snow-white body. For the first time they'd seen the pelts, she told herself she wasn't curious to know which was hers. That it didn't matter. Cat or mouse or whatever, they were all just animals. She hadn't let herself try to guess the truth in her gestures or reflection in the mirror, but now she knew. I was an owl. The truth didn't hurt like she thought it would. There was no hot sting of shame, rather she felt the opposite. Warmth spread through her freshly beating heart, filling the place where a dark, cold thing had always been. Maybe it hadn't been dark at all. Maybe she just hadn't ever bothered to pull back the curtains and consider it in the right light. Something rose in her, a sensation beneath her breastbone like flying. Maybe that was why she was so drawn to the jacket with the gargoyle embroidery, because of the wings and the talons. She had recognized a piece of herself in it even before she knew what she was. Its threads had reminded her of the life she'd once led. She wasn't an owl now, not anymore. But was she really a human? Maybe not entirely. Maybe she didn't have to be. She could be something both pretty and ugly, light and dark, human and not. She pushed open the townhouse door. The dog nudged its way in beside her, wagging its tail and its nails clickety-clacked on the marble floors. She took her time after all time had ceased to be her enemy, and listened to the thunk of her shoes on Madavatora's marble floors. Only it wasn't Madavatora's house now. It belonged to Vigo, she gasped. She tore up the stairs. Fear struck her like the tolling of a clock. That she'd pushed open the bedroom door to find his eyes closed, his face pale, his body cold. That she'd taken too much blood, and for what? Her plan hadn't even worked. The dog padded up the stairs behind her, excited by her hurry without understanding why. She rested a hand on her bedroom door, hesitating, afraid Vigo was dead, afraid he wasn't, because then she'd have to explain to him what had happened to the others, especially Hunter Black. "Vigo?" She entered the bedroom with her heart in her throat. His eyes were closed, just like in her nightmares. His face was pale. She pressed a hand to her mouth to stifle a cry. Not him, too. She didn't want to be alone. Didn't want the townhouse to herself, all the food in the kitchen, the empty rooms, the empty halls. She'd put on an apron again and scrub every last crumb of the floor if it could bring her friends back. She sank onto the bed. "Oh, Vigo! Oh, no!" With a jerk, she sucked in a breath and let out a rasping snort. She reached for him so fast that she accidentally slapped him. His eyes shot open as he swatted away her hand. "What? Who?" "Vigo!" She collapsed on him. She didn't mind the slouchy knit hat that scratched her skin or how he smelled like stale brandy. She squeezed him hard. "Can't breathe. Oh!" She sat up, biting her lip, unable to hide her grin. "I thought you were dead." "I almost was. You nearly strangled me." The dog jumped on the bed, all nuzzling wet nose and big brown eyes. Vigo blinked a few times. "What," he said, "is that? And where is everyone?" Anouk felt the blood drain from her face. She looked away. Slowly, in halting words, she told him what had happened. The siege of the chateau, the wooden soldiers, Tenpenny turned to stone, Cricket and Luke changed back into animals, and of course Hunter Black too. To her surprise, when she told him the worst of it, he pulled her into a hug. "They're still alive," he whispered fiercely in her ear. "Quick, Cricket and Luke, and maybe even Hunter Black. Which means we can turn them back somehow. It isn't over, not while the two of us are still breathing." She didn't know what to say. Viggo hadn't shown much backbone in his pampered life, but these 3 days had changed him, just as they had changed her. "How?" she asked. He brushed at her lipstick heart-stained cheek. "You'll find a way. You have so far, and I'll be there to cause convenient distractions when you need them most." She smiled, but it faded quickly. "There's something else. I told the rest of the goblins they could come here to tend to the wounded. They're on their way now. Don't be surprised if the house starts to sound like the inside of a discotheque and you find pet rats crawling around." She scrubbed a hand over her face and realized she was still covered in blood, sweat, ash, Tenpenny's makeup, and even a few errant pieces of glitter. It really did stick to everything. "I need a shower." "Use the Mata's bathtub. This townhouse is yours now as much as it's mine. Move your things from your room to the master bedroom if you like. You've earned a proper ensuite." The dog jumped off the bed when she stood and followed her into the hall. She found herself looking at the house with new eyes. Those cobwebs that had sprung up the corners, let them stay. The paw prints on the hardwood floor, not her problem. The goblins would make a mess of anything anyway, and let them. It was time things loosened up around the townhouse. Once in her room, she'd freed her messy hair from its ponytail and ran her fingers through the tangles, picked off her boots one at a time, peeled off her dirty tuxedo trousers and tossed them onto the floor. Shrugged off her Faustine jacket, brushing a finger over the place where its metallic threads had deflected magic, and then she carried the jacket downstairs to the Mata's bedroom. The plush rug tickled her bare feet, and she wiggled her 8 toes into luxurious fibers. The dog plodded straight for the Grand Master's bedroom. She followed it in, sat on the edge of the tub, and turned on the hot water. Steam rose, easing her muscles. She peeled off the rest of her clothes and sank into the tub, sucking in a breath at the almost painful pleasure of the hot bath. Glass bottles of bath salts lined the edge of the tub. Gardenia, rose water, lavender. She kicked over the lavender bottle, letting it clatter to the floor. She never wanted to smell lavender again so as long as she lived. She chose another, and then the scent of the gardenia filled the room as she leaned back in the tub, sinking deep until the water tickled her chin. The dog lay down next to the bathtub, resting its head on its paws. She closed her eyes and sank even lower, holding her breath, letting the water cover her head. She felt her hair fan out around her like a mermaid's, like a Selka's. What was she going to do now? She didn't even know if Hunter Black was alive. Cricket and Luke were imprisoned by Renard. He'd take them back to Castle Ides and lock them in those awful cages. He had to know what she'd come from them. They were literally bait. Would his offer still stand? If she climbed out of this bath dressed in Mata Vitora's finest black suit, took a car across town, and rode the elevator up to the penthouse of Castle Ides, would he still agree to the trade he'd promised? That if she was his bride, he'd turn her friends back into humans? It was an intriguing offer, but it was also her only offer, and yet she could imagine, like the winding tunnels of the catacombs, where that path would lead. He'd uphold his promise and turn them human, but at a heavy cost. His little monsters. And she would share his table, have a throne by his side, a place in his bed, bound to him eternally, princess of a kingdom she loathed. Underwater she blew out her breath in a flurry of bubbles, eyes squeezed shut. The smell of gardenia permeated the water, smoothing over her skin, weaving into her hair. It made her think of Luke and his herbs. There was a lot of life essence up there in the attic, all of it perfectly catalogued. Even more than Amatazola's storeroom. Even more than she'd seen in Castle Ides. She sat up abruptly, water streaming down her face. The dog gave her a curious look. The Faustine jacket lay by the edge of the tub, and she grabbed it and rubbed the fabric between her fingers. Every witch had 2 things, a moniker and an obolette. She reached into the jacket pockets where she'd stored so many treasures. The coin, the knife, the clock. With the right spell, could these pockets fill the role of an obolette? She knew a little of how witches became witches. They started as pretty girls, as humans, just like her, more or less. There were training academies deep in the Bavarian forests, where the girls learned through trials how to call forth and command magic. The girls who survived the initiation ceased to be pretties and became witches, capable of performing any spell, even the most complex one she knew of, the beastie spell. Her fingers curled around the edges of the tub. She wouldn't stay in the townhouse and drink champagne and sleep in a big bed, not as long as her friends were in cages, but maybe she wouldn't go to Castle Hides either. Maybe, though it was such a dangerous idea she only dared to whisper it to herself, she would go to a castle in the woods, a place of snow and smoke, a house of girls who all wanted the same thing she wanted, and who would kill to get it, and maybe she'd kill too if she had to, and she'd return and find her friends, and she'd turn them back human again with her own voice. She leaned over the edge of the tub, looked down at the dog. "Little Bo," she said, toes splashing in the bath water, "can I tell you a secret?" But the words hung unspoken on her lips. She didn't even dare tell the dog. Witches were the enemy. How could she consider becoming the enemy? Cricket, if Cricket were still herself, would kill her for even thinking it. She sank into the water one more time, submerged in a gardenia and bath salts. Once an owl, a maid, a servant, a little dust mop. But maybe she could be more. She had the jacket, an obolette. Now she just needed a moniker. Matavatore had been the Diamond Witch, Matazola the Lavender Witch. But she was something with talons and wings and magic, something both beautiful and ugly, something gifted and cursed. "A nook," she whispered in silent bubbles beneath the perfumed water. A whisper just for her, full of great danger and even greater hope. The Gargoyle Witch. That's the last that's the last page of the book. Although there is actually a sort of teaser of the sequel. Thank you for listening. I don't know why, but I thought I remembered part of the sequel being part of the first book. So that means I probably just went right from reading the first book to reading the second book. Thank you for listening. Okay. Back to library. Goodbye for now.